of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prayer this morning will be offered by our newest delegate representing Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you all could join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, today we gather with solemn hearts to acknowledge the anniversary of the tragic collapse of the Key Bridge. We remember the lives lost, the families forever changed, and the brave first responders who risked everything in the face of devastation. Lord, we ask that you continue to bring comfort to those who grieve, strength to those who rebuild, and wisdom to those who lead. In moments of loss, you remind us of the power of resilience and unity. We thank you for the spirit of compassion that rose from this tragedy, the hands that reached out to help, the communities that stood together, and the determination that carries us forward. May we always honor those who have lost by working to create a safer and stronger Maryland. Guide us, Lord, as we make decisions in this chamber. May we serve with integrity, wisdom, and a heart for people, always seeking the well-being of those we are called to represent. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There have been 130 members present, and the House is now in session. The clerk will read the journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March the 10th, 2025.
Recognizing the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the journal.
So ordered. Petitions, memorials, and other papers. Recognizing the good delegate representing Washington and Frederick counties.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, we ask you to join us in welcoming the Boonesboro High School We the People team on their 10th consecutive Maryland State Championship win this past December at the Pip Moyer Recreation Center in Annapolis. We the People, the Citizen and the Constitution, is a comprehensive curriculum for elementary, middle, and high school students covering the history and principles of constitutional democracy in the United States. We the People culminates with simulated congressional hearings where students testify before a panel of judges acting as members of Congress. This year, 28 students are with us from Boonesboro High School, along with their coach, Ashley Vasic, and Skyland Metzner and Nate Dickinson are on the dais representing the 28 students that are here today. So we ask you in welcoming them to Annapolis and congratulating them on their victory.
Will the reading clerk please read the resolution in full?
Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the Boonesboro High School We the People team in recognition of your 10th consecutive state championship as scholars of the history and principles of constitutional democracy in the United States. The entire membership extends best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on this 26th day of March 2025.
Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 132 members present, and the House is still in session. Calendar of third reading House bills, number 116. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 350, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2026.
House Bill 116 is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Yes.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to rise today in opposition to this budget and the new taxes and fees that support it. To me, this budget is wrong for Maryland businesses, it's wrong for Maryland families, and it's wrong for the future of Maryland. It was John Adams, the great founding father, who said in 1770 that facts are stubborn things. His quote goes on to say, whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Well, these words to me have never been more true than they are today as we consider what I would say is a misguided, a bloated, and a fiscally irresponsible budget. Here are some of the facts for the citizens of Maryland, for the news media, and for the delegates about to vote here. Fact, the budget proposed is significantly higher than last year. Spending in this budget has increased. This year's budget contained hundreds of millions of more dollars in spending than last year's budget. Fact, this budget proposal has been filled with misleading statements to Maryland citizens. It has been based on what I would call a shell game designed to make Maryland citizens believe that there are truly extensive cuts. This is not true. Fact is, this fiscally irresponsible budget is shifting costs to local government, raiding contributions to a rainy day fund, and using accounting illusions to attempt to make this budget look reasonable. Our budget analysts have been warning us for years about the financial conditions of Maryland. They warned the House when the majority overrode Governor Hogan's veto of Kerwin. They told us we could not pay for it, yet the majority party did it anyway. Our budget analysts continue to warn us every year that Governor Moore has submitted a budget, yet Maryland went on a spending spree and blew through billions in surplus, and now here we are, where Governor Moore and the majority just last year raised 338 taxes and fees. Another fact, now that the governor and the majority are trying to blame, of all people, President Trump, who just came into office. The simple truth of the matter is Joe Biden was the president when this mess started, and he continued each and every year. This budget crisis was created by this legislature and this governor, and not President Trump. Another fact, now after all the irresponsible spending, the bad budgets, and the lack of restraint, we've ended up here where the governor and this House is about to impose the largest tax increase on Marylanders in our history. My final fact, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that Maryland, we do not have a revenue problem in this state. We have a spending problem. This budget is wrong, fiscally irresponsible, it's harmful. I'm proudly voting no, and I urge each of my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minority Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Not more.
Well, we've heard a lot. Yesterday we had 7 hours of lively debate. You know, this is the first time in my 7 years coming here that I'm not going to be able to vote for the budget. And the reason for that is this budget, as introduced, requires massive tax increases. Even last year did not require that. This budget was in error since the beginning. And now this body owns it. As was just mentioned, this budget is bigger than last year. How do we rectify that with the people of this state? They know that we walked into a massive deficit and their immediate reaction is that we should reduce expenses, but yet we continue to grow government. We continue to spend more. And the only way that this budget works is by raising taxes $1.6 billion. It's disappointing. We showed you clearly that we could have balanced this budget without tax increases, and it was rejected. It's not what the people want. So I'm just going to say this for the last time. This body now owns this budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. So, we heard yesterday concerning the budget of Maryland that business people and individuals don't earn the money from capital gains. They didn't really earn that. And that really, I think, defines the philosophical difference between the majority party and the minority party. Namely, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. There are literally hundreds of millions of people who would like to leave countries that have that philosophy. The philosophy of Marxism, Leninism, socialism doesn't work, and it never has. The other thing that we heard yesterday was all wealth comes from the state. And we know that that's not true, because if it were, the majority party wouldn't be asking the private sector to pay for their spending to grow the state. We also debated the just massive amounts of taxes. As you have heard, more than $1.6 billion worth of taxes hitting every single Marylander. Despite what the majority party says, they said 94% of Marylanders won't receive a tax increase or fee increase. That's simply not so. Your taxes will hit every Marylander, and it will hit certainly the private sector the most. And so here is my warning to the private sector of Maryland, all of those who have small businesses and medium-sized businesses in the state of Maryland, as well as a warning to all of those who are even contemplating moving to Maryland. Don't move into Maryland. And if you have a small business and a medium-sized business, get out of Maryland now. The Democrat Party sees you as an ATM machine, and they will never stop until such time as they have the perfect socialist government that will then collapse upon itself because there is no revenue left, as they call it, but really taxes left to collect. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that on this floor, but I think it's now time. Get out of Maryland if you have a business. The majority party doesn't respect you. They don't care about you. And I'm glad you're filming me. I'm glad, because I'll take that debate with you any day of the week. Tell me I'm wrong that you as Democrats don't want businesses to leave, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be taxing them the way you are. A member of your own party wants to move his business. So go ahead and film me, please. Go ahead and debate me, I dare you. I'll debate you in Montgomery County all day long. And you know what? I'm hearing from people in Montgomery County, and they want to leave too. So it shouldn't come as a surprise, Madam Speaker, that I'm not voting for this budget. As I haven't voted for so many others, because the majority party doesn't know when to stop spending other people's money. And guess what? You're running out of other people's money, as socialists always do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Speaker.
I rise today as a proud member of the Appropriations Committee. Yesterday was hard. It was a glimpse into what this session's been like in Appropriations. But somehow it was a little less heart-wrenching. Restoring $300 million to DDA, it's not easy. The road to get there was filled with hundreds of hours of meetings and testimony. Fearful parents, our most vulnerable Marylanders. It means sitting in your office, combing through the budget with some of the best staff, looking for cuts when you can still feel the sting of parents' testimony. I am so thankful to have a chair of HSS and our chair in Appropriations who cares so deeply about these families. And you, Madam Speaker, who put this at the center. You know, 139 of you do something that 2 of us don't ever do. You go home, you travel home. For 2 of us, we are home. So when I grab my lunch, I'm with constituents. When I meet colleagues for a meeting at a local restaurant, I'm surrounded by constituents. And they constantly say, I'm so thankful I live in Maryland. I am so thankful that Maryland is here, remembering the most vulnerable of us, standing up for all of us. $1.6 billion in spending cuts, restoring $300 million to cuts for DDA, as I said, and $2 billion in rainy day. That takes a ton of work, a ton of heart, and never, ever letting up. It was said to me by a constituent who had come to me multiple times with hands shaking, worried about her family. The restoration of critical funding means that individuals who rely on essential services will continue to receive the care and support they need to live with dignity and stability. As a parent navigating the complexities of this disability system, I know firsthand how devastating the potential cuts could have been. Thank you so much. So to that, I am so proud to be a member of this committee for the last 75 days and to aid in this work. And I will be a green vote on this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So yesterday I heard my friend from Montgomery County say that this budget won't affect 96% of Marylanders, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I represent 4 small counties on the Eastern Shore. All 4 counties are deeply, deeply affected by this budget and are struggling with trying to figure out how to make ends meet. But one, and most in particular, is Dorchester County. We're looking at a $7.1 million shortfall. Now, from Montgomery County or Prince George's County, that's probably chump change. But we're looking at a budget in Dorchester County that's only $92 million. We're almost 9.6% short, and we're trying to figure out how to make it work. It's being driven by the blueprint. It's being driven by the teachers' pensions. It's being driven by the SSTAT push down to the county. So the counties come back with some ideas. Now, fortunately, we can raise the piggyback tax. But we're going to be taxing everybody when we do that. And that's only going to bring us about $600,000. We're going to increase the 911 fees from $2 to $4.25. I think everybody in Dorchester County owns a cell phone. We're also going to push down the tax differential back to the municipalities. That means $1 million goes down to the city of Cambridge. So what's the city of Cambridge going to have to do? The city of Cambridge is going to have to raise property taxes. 50% of the population of Cambridge are renters. What are those landlords going to do when their property taxes go up? They're going to raise their rent. May not be a direct tax on them, but it's affecting everyone that's there. But it gets worse in Dorchester County. Our school board has a $5.5 million shortfall. So what's the school board going to do? Well, they just said that they're not going to give raises that they negotiated with the union to try to get them to the $60,000 minimum. So what we're seeing now are teachers fleeing out of the county to go elsewhere where they can get paid $60,000 a year. We just announced that we're shutting down summer school. And they're going to be laying off 25% of the student support personnel. That's 38% of the student support personnel. That doesn't sound like a world-class education for me in Dorchester County. So for those reasons, I'll be a no on this.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Folks, I think today's a bad day for many Maryland residents, a lot of Maryland businesses. You know, the tax bills we're passing for this budget, over a third of those tax bills, over a third of the money being generated by those tax bills, never even had a hearing. Do you think this is the way Marylanders really think that our government operates? Or should it? You know, I have grave concern that this budget is going to chase many Maryland residents, many Maryland businesses. Our businesses need a stable environment where they know what the rules are going to be from one year to the next. We keep throwing tax policy out, seeing what sticks, and we expect us to grow the private sector. How are we going to do that? And we heard on the floor yesterday that capital gains we don't work for. It's okay to tax. It's okay to tax and add a surcharge. Well, if anybody saw the shins that I have, the scars from working on apartment buildings that I renovated to make a better living for families that live there, tearing out 300-pound cast iron tubs, being on the roof of a 3- and 4-story apartment building, I could tell you, I work for that money. And for people to sit here and think it's okay just to take, you know, we heard if you can afford bullion, you can afford the 6% tax. You know, this is affecting people's livelihoods. There are businesses here that operate on selling gold and silver. It's like the only analogy I have to that mindset is it's okay to tax your 401k an extra 6%. Because if you can afford that investment, you should be able to afford an extra 6%. It's just not the way it is. I can put an ounce of gold is the size of a silver dollar. You can go over the state line, come back with $20,000 worth of gold in your hand, put it in your pocket. You don't need a truck. You're not bringing bricks of gold back. But this is the way people invest. So why don't we just add a 6% surcharge to 401k? It's no different. People can afford a 401k. You can afford the tax. You know, we heard bills to increase the tax on guns because we think taxes will deter people from having guns. We have a 9% liquor tax because a higher tax deters people from using it. We kept the tax low on marijuana so we didn't have an illegal market thrive. So we understand taxes have consequences. It deters behavior. But why do we think that taxes are not going to deter businesses? We got to pick which side we're going to use. We can't use these arguments both ways. But we feel that we get tax Marylanders and we get tax businesses and it's not going to have consequences. It's just not the case. You know, when you listen to the conversations here on the floor, it's real easy to tell who has signed the front of a paycheck and most have signed only the back. And there's a difference. I'll be voting no on this budget.
Gentleman from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We talk about facts, and the fact is that we are here as a body to dispense justice and fairness to all Marylanders across this state. And I'm disappointed that the minority party wants our people, our citizens, to go it alone based on their proposals on this budget. They want every man to fight for themselves. And that's just not how this works. Because we got to think about how wealth was developed in this country. We got to think about the wrongs that need to be righted from history. That black and brown and marginalized and poor people are in the place that they are because of unfair policies that have been passed down through the ages throughout our country and through this state. And so I'm proud as a member of the Appropriations Committee to support this budget that takes in mind all Marylanders, especially the most vulnerable of all of us. We will not forget them. We will not leave them by the wayside. And the saying goes is that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, we all got to go together and row in the same direction. And so I'm going to explain why I'm supporting this budget and why the work we've done on our subcommittees is so important and should not be sized by the fear-mongering of the minority party. Let's talk about the blueprint. The Republicans want us to act like an investor who's just jumped into the stock market and sees the stock market plummeting a little bit and wants to pull their money out immediately a couple months after investing. We have invested in children, our future, the future leaders of this state. That investment is not going to magically appear and we're going to have the top schools in the country overnight. Now, I wasn't here when we made that investment, but I support it to the fullest because there are children in Baltimore City who don't have heat in their schools. There are children in Baltimore City who have to go to school in 100-degree temperatures. This is what is right and fair to make sure that we see our investment through, and that's why we refuse to come off of the investment that we've made in our children, especially those who need the community coordinated services that we're going to be providing, the teachers that need the collaborative time, $122.4 million that we're investing in that. $605.8 million increases to local aid to your schools in every single county. That's what governance stands for. And how do we create economic growth in this country? In this state? Maybe by having the best schools possible. If we continue with our investment, we're going to see the economic growth because people are going to want to stay. Just like in Baltimore City this year, we had our first year of not losing any population numbers. Because it's working. I talked to my chair about it, and he told me that the blueprint model is working in Baltimore City, and it will work everywhere else if we stay the course. So I know there's 38 people in here who's not going to listen to anything I got to say right now. But to the 102, this is for you. Stand firm, 10 toes down on this budget with us, because it's the right thing to do for Marylanders. And economic growth, we're investing $136 million in economic growth for our state, $27.5 million in Tradeport Atlantic, so that we can get folks to work. $200 million, yes, in salary increases and COLA increases for state workers, because the biggest supporters that we have for our citizens are our state workers. As you saw on the night where the union workers were standing on Lawyers Mall and about to shout down the House of Delegates walls. Those are the people that we need to be protecting. How about dealing with the issues of social justice for juvenile offenders? Where was that conversation yesterday from the Republican Party? We have committed $5 million in additional funding for juvenile services this year to ensure that we don't have to go back to last year and make a law that has to place young black people and brown people and poor people that are 10, 11, and 12 years old into prisons, into the criminal justice system. This is what our budget and our morals and our values are about in this budget. Stand 10 toes down. And the most proud thing, I'm proud about in this budget is what we've done in the healthcare realm. We worked together. I worked with the chair of my subcommittee, the good lady from Montgomery County. And we saw that $15 million was about to be snatched from our cancer research centers, some of the top in the whole nation, that have produced 400,000 cancer survivors in the state of Maryland to date, one of them being my mother. And they said to us, If you take this money from us, we will be downgraded. We will not be able to provide the research that we need for Marylanders who are suffering some of the most heinous, some of the most terrible situations that you can imagine. We restored that with the leadership of our speaker, the leadership of our committee chair, the leadership of our subcommittee chair. We made sure to make the tough decisions. $15.6 billion. What does that number stand for? This is the thing I'm most proud of. I was at St. Bartholomew's Church on Sunday, visiting with people in my district to talk about this budget right here. And although there were a lot of people in the audience, there was one person on Zoom who was really special. She logged in and she was appearing on video from her hospital room. And she made one specific request. She was an 85-year-old black woman. And she said, "Don't take my Medicaid. Don't take the Medicaid from poor people across the state." And guess who that lady was? Former delegate, former senator, the first Afro-Caribbean woman to be elected to this body, Senator Shirley Nathan Pulliam. So, Dems, I'm here to tell you, stand 10 toes down for this budget. It is the right thing to do. Do not disappoint the good senator, and do not disappoint the constituents that need you the most right now. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate my friend from Baltimore City, but I don't appreciate being yelled at. I don't appreciate being told that we don't laugh all you want, but if I did it to you, you wouldn't like it much. Understand what you're doing here. Understand what you're doing here. Is there anything, do you pay enough attention to understand that there is nothing in the Medicaid amendments we offered, nothing that takes away Medicaid from an 85-year-old woman who's on Medicare, by the way? I don't know. I don't know if we know how things work here in Maryland. They seem to know how they work in Virginia. They seem to know how they work in Pennsylvania and Delaware and West Virginia, but we can't get it done here in Maryland. We're the smartest state. We're the best state. We're the greatest state. We're the only state in our damn region that has a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit and needs to raise billions of dollars in taxes to do the same stuff that they can do in Richmond. They have black and brown people in Richmond. I lived there. You're from there. They have them there. They're not getting up in the halls of Richmond and saying, we got to do this for them. They have black and brown people in West Virginia, in Delaware, in Pennsylvania. They're not saying we got to do this here. You know why we got to do this here in Maryland? Because we're a poorly run state. And I don't blame all of you. We're all complicit in it. The man upstairs has only been there for 2-3 years. I don't blame him for our economic failures of the last 10. We're all complicit in it. Don't tell me that we don't have enough money to put air conditioning and heating in Baltimore City schools. We spent $63 billion 2 years ago. We couldn't have put a couple million of that into a school system? Sure, we could have. But we chose to take it and give it to somebody else. We chose to take it and give it to somebody else. Do I think the blueprint is great? I don't know. I think there's some parts of it that are good. There's some parts we can work on. But my sweet Jesus, we spend more money per pupil than most places in the United States. And where are our test scores? Where are our test scores? Anybody know? They ain't that good. They ain't that good. Let's quit fooling ourselves that we pay more money and we've got the best schools in the country, because we don't. And you took out some of the private schools, some of the Gilmans, some of the Georgetown Preps, some of those places. You take some of those schools, some of the DeMathas, you take some of those schools, and what they do with private dollars out of our scores and our straight public school scores go terribly. That's a sin. I got to send my son to middle school and high school in a couple of years, and I'm terrified because the public schools where I live, far away from Baltimore City, it's not a Baltimore City problem. The public schools where I live, the academic performance has steadily stagnated or gone down. I have to make those decisions. Stop saying that the Medicaid cuts that we offered applied to 85-year-old women or poor people. The Medicaid cuts we offered, unless that individual you discussed was getting gender-affirming care or was an undocumented immigrant or was making $100,000 a year and providing for her children, that's all we cut. That's it. Not poor people, not people getting base levels of care. We didn't eliminate the blueprint in our proposal. We said, take a pause. Because guess what, folks? You don't have the money. You don't have the money. You didn't have the money 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and you came in this year and you went, whoopsie. We don't have the money. And what's our solution? I don't know. I guess our solution is raise all the taxes. And we heard, well, the taxes are only going to go up on 6% of people. Do only 6% of Marylanders buy a car every year? Used car, new car, doesn't matter what kind of car you buy, you're going to be paying more taxes this year. Do only 6% of Marylanders buy something from a vending machine? I don't know. That's going to be going up too. Do only 6% of Marylanders and Maryland businesses purchase tech services? I want you to look. I don't know. I don't know if some of you actually look and read. It's right here for you. It's a sheet that the very good staff of the Ways and Means Committee, the Appropriations Committee, the Department of Legislative Services provide. You're all intelligent people. I'm proud to serve with all 140 of you. You're all certainly smart enough to read the sheet. What is the single biggest source of taxes that you're raising? It ain't on the rich people. It's $500 million this year, expected to go to $650 million on a tech tax that applies to everybody and every business. It's not limited to the millionaires. Your constituents are going to pay it too. Your small businesses are going to pay it. You're not here taxing the rich to give to the poor. That is a fallacy. That is a dream. That's how you guys want to view yourself. That's how you want to put it on Twitter. I wouldn't know how to put a Twitter tweet, whatever the hell out is. You put a gun to my head, I wouldn't know how to tweet. But everybody likes to tweet here. Everybody likes it. Because we're starting to think that we're Washington, D.C., and we're not, because we can't print our own money. We have to take it from somebody else. And we're taking it. I want our schools to be better. Republicans want poor people and lower middle class people and struggling people to have health care. We do. We want our state to be better. But I will tell you this, if you can find me a state in the history, the modern history of the United States of America that's run the way that the state of Maryland is, that's doing well, you let me know. You let me know. We can follow California right off the edge of the cliff. We don't have Silicon Valley. We don't have Hollywood. We're not the world's 5th largest economy. We're not even the 5th largest economy on the East Coast, for God's sakes. Stop pretending that we can do these things in a vacuum and they don't have an impact. Because I tell you what, they're not doing them in Virginia. They're not. Virginia is based around Washington, D.C. too, at least a large part of it. They don't seem to be having these problems. Virginia has a need to have good schools. Newsflash, look it up on your phones while we're sitting here. Virginia schools are ranked in the same range as what ours are. A little bit better, a little bit worse, different things. They don't have a blueprint in Virginia. Shocking. They don't have a blueprint in Virginia. They didn't have a man named Dr. Kerwin who came with the aid of a variety of people and special interest groups and said, the only way we're going to have good schools is if we spend more money than has ever been spent in the history of money. That's the only way we're going to do it. Didn't do it in Virginia, didn't do it in Delaware, didn't do it in Pennsylvania. We got to do it here. Why? I don't know. I think everybody here is controlled by the people who sit on a lawyer's mall handing you those flyers. They're controlled by this very small group of people. The squeakiest wheel gets the grease, and in the state of Maryland, the loudest advocacy groups in a supermajority party get the juice. And they got the juice. But that's not the average Marylander. You're raising more taxes than anyone who's ever sat in this room and raised. I want you to think about that. You're raising more taxes than anyone who has ever sat in this room has raised. And you're doing it because you cannot restrain the rate of growth in some programs that you promised people years ago that you couldn't pay for. And if it doesn't work, if next year we're back here in 9 months and gee whizzikers, those revenues didn't go through the roof, those costs sure went up, I guess we got to do it again. And eventually you go to the well one time too many and you break it. And that's where we're at. Please, please, I respect all of you. I know and I believe that in your hearts you want to do things in the best interests of the state. Please don't suggest that we don't. Please just understand that we have a fundamental philosophical difference about the role of government. And I think that the man upstairs on the second floor shares some of it, because he's acknowledged over and over and over again, Maryland has become a state too much that's of the government, by the government, and for the government. And without a strong private sector, we will fail. And this is another step in that direction. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Good gentleman from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. I'm going to try to lower the temperature a little bit in the room.
Please.
We've talked, you got it. We talked a lot about fee increases. We talked about raising the excise tax, accelerating registration fees, even titling tax increases on mopeds from $20 to $40, which I know gives a tremendous amount of heartburn to my colleague in Cecil County, and I feel you on that. But what I want to talk about is the investments that we have made as a body and will continue to make with this money. The budget of the Maryland Transit Administration for capital alone is over $800 million. That is going to be used to continue building the Purple Line. It will be used to build the Red Line. That is how we move our commuter buses around the entire state that take our residents from home to work. It's how we get our kids to school. It's how we create economic development in the city of Baltimore and the Baltimore region, and that's why I'm so proud to support it. But in addition to that, we also voted for a budget that includes the State Highway Administration. And the State Highway Administration's capital program is $1.1 billion. And I'm proud to vote for the State Highway Administration's capital budget too, even though it results in no projects in Baltimore City. That budget goes to repairing the roads and bridges and highways around our state. And I want to tell you about the return on investment that that has had. The State Highway Administration has a goal of making sure 85% of the roads in the state of Maryland are in good repair, and they exceed that goal every year thanks to your investment. They have a goal of making sure that our bridges are in good repair, a conversation we've talked a lot about, and that is particularly important today. Thanks to the investments that you have made and we will continue to make, less than 1% of the bridges in the state of Maryland are not in good repair. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. That doesn't mean unsafe. That simply means that one aspect of that bridge isn't in good repair, and that number has come down precipitously and will continue to come down based on the investments that you have made. And the reason that is so important, I just want to make this clear. I know the minority leader said that our state is so small you can barely find it on a map at a Ruby Tuesday, but that is not an inexpensive investment. We have thousands of bridges in this state and tens of thousands of roadway miles. And we have to invest in the safety of our residents. Because when we do, when we fix an intersection, when we replace a traffic light, when we fix a sidewalk, when we build a bike and pedestrian access path, when we fix corridors on our highways, that means that Marylanders get to work safely. That means they are quicker to drop their kids off at school. That means they get to work happier, resulting in a more productive workforce, which is good for our economy, and it protects Marylanders. Let me be clear. I just want to close with this. I am voting in favor of this capital program for the State Highway Administration, even though there are no projects from it in Baltimore City. I knocked on thousands of doors to win this seat. I didn't have one single conversation with a constituent about how excited I am to get down to Annapolis to vote for the State Highway Administration capital program. Not one. But I'm happy to push a green button for this budget and the BRFA that will support it, because that is what responsible governing is. Even though it will raise tens of millions of dollars from Baltimore City and support projects everywhere in the state but Baltimore City, that is what good, responsible governing is, and that is why I am proud to vote for this budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on the budget. This is a day that I am going to deliver on a promise I made to citizens before session started, that I cannot and will not vote for a budget that's not structurally balanced, or if the only way to structurally balance it is to do it through the lens of tax increases. The economy doesn't allow for it. Our future as a state of Maryland is not going to allow for it, and therefore as citizens, as I'm explaining them back home, this is why I'm not voting on this bill. I said the other day that this legislature is constitutionally mandated to pass one bill. We all know that. It's this bill. So why wouldn't a good delegate from the Eastern Shore do what is responsible under our Constitution, which is find a way to support the budget? I'm a business owner. How do you go through business without budgeting? How do you go through the exercise of making tough decisions without actually making the tough decision to move forward? And I can say to you this, that as a Republican, my good friend from Baltimore City, I heard every word you had to say. Every word you had to say. So let me just say, as a Republican, most of us have our ears on and we listen. A few weeks ago, the majority whip said a few things that got a few of us whipped up, so to speak. And I remember saying at the time that friction is the mechanism for progress. I embrace that. Look, I think the tenor was a little hot coming from Baltimore City, but it's not like I don't understand it. We knew that the budget was going to be the #1 issue coming into the General Assembly session this year. So, Madam Speaker, inside of 2 minutes, and I promise to be brief, I'm on. You can go ahead and use your timer, Mr. Clerk. I don't think this is Republican, Democrat. I don't think it's a policy decision between conservative and liberal. I think it's a conversation amongst our own legislature that created 2 commissions. And those 2 commissions are coming at a clash right now. And those 2 commissions are the Augustine Commission and the Quorum Commission. Those 2 commissions gave guidance and recommendations to this legislature for 2 separate reasons. And let me just criticize for a moment the Quorum Commission. Not because of the goals, and not because we didn't need to resolve Thornton formula spending, that we need to make spending fairer, but because this legislature basically handed that commission the opportunity to write a blank check, and that blank check is coming due. And to the chairman of Appropriations, it's not like I don't understand it, because it's hard not to vote for the children. It's hard not to vote for the educators. Here's my comment. It's not this budget that scares me. It's the one that comes 2, 3, 4 years down the road that scares me about Kerwin. A business owner would see it coming like a freight train and say, either I got to get out of the way of it or I need to own it. And I've given some tough love to the governor back home before session started, because I said the governor needs to own this problem with the Quorum Commission. This is not only unaffordable, it's not even realistic moving forward, and I'm going to run for re-election. I should probably go do it after I leave today, because I want to be here when we're having these serious conversations about what we did today and how it's making life 10 times more difficult than before. The Augustine Commission was created because we had a governor, Martin O'Malley, and a legislature that went absolutely bonkers with taxes and fees. Mike Miller, Mike Bush understood it, created it. Members of this General Assembly participated in it. And those findings, and I would highly recommend my friend from Baltimore City, I understand the Quorum Commission. I've read much of what has come from it. Recommend you read the Augustine Commission front to back to understand what they were saying in generality, which is at some point the state of Maryland is too heavily dependent on Washington, D.C., too heavily dependent on federal spending, and that the state a decade ago was being given recommendations to solve that problem for future generations of policymakers like us, so we're not faced with a situation that we're in today. That was the Augustine Commission in 2 sentences. We are here today to pass a budget. I have to hope that the Senate takes a look at it, revises it. You go into conference committee, whatever that looks like. I've never participated in it. But at some point, somebody's got to look at our citizens and say, this is not the right way to move forward 2, 3, 4 years down the road. The governor on the second floor right now cannot be happy
looking at what DLS proposed for what our budget looks like down the road, because I have to imagine DLS is giving you the warning that today's the day that you've got to fix tomorrow's problems. So, Madam Speaker, that was more than 2 minutes.
Yes, it was.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor to serve in this legislature and be a part of this exercise of government. I understand the difficulty. I can't vote for this budget. Please, at some point, can the Senate and the House come together and make it something where a conservative can vote for it? For now, it's a no.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I want to be clear about something, that I'm controlled by the people that sent me here. And my constituents sent me here to make difficult decisions on their behalf. It's easy to criticize. It's harder to govern. And there's no clearer evidence of that than former Governor Larry Hogan. He avoided tough decisions, and I know that because my first term, he was going into his second. And he avoided a lot of difficult decisions. He kicked the can down the road. And then he attempted to claim the federal surplus as his own, which is not true. It is because of the COVID pandemic and the federal dollars that flowed into our state, he was able to go in front of the cameras and tell them that he created a surplus, which wasn't true. We're sent here to make tough decisions. Our constituents know what the state of our budget is. This is the only constitutionally mandated thing that we have to do in the 90-day session that we're here. And I'm committed to doing something about it because I recognize that we cannot get to a good economy and we can't get to economic development with cuts and cuts alone. Austerity measures is not going to get us to a better economy. It has to be a mix of all of it. It has to be efficiency cuts, which this budget includes. It has to include tax raises on those who can and should be paying more, which is in the BRFA. And it includes us making tough decisions so that vulnerable communities are not the ones that are hurting as a result of our budget deficit. We're here to make tough decisions. It's easy to criticize, and it's even harder to govern. And what the majority party on the Appropriations Committee, and certainly on my subcommittee did, we wrestled with tough decisions. Do we make steep cuts to DDA, leaving our disability community behind? Do we make cuts to health care, to Medicaid, to the low-income people who are dependent on these policies? Do we leave our kids behind? Do we not invest in our education system? Really, the only thing that's going to promise us a strong economy and an educated workforce to be able to lead it. That's what we're here to do. I'm here to make tough decisions, and part of those tough decisions is looking at our state's unfair and inequitable tax code. That's not my opinion, it's a fact. Maryland has an inequitable tax code. And if you talk to more and more Marylanders, their idea of a fair tax code is not the wealthier and corporations paying less. No Marylander will tell you that the wealthy and corporations paying less is their idea of fairness and equity when it comes to taxes. There are amendments on the BRFA to allow those who make contributions to nonprofits and philanthropy. And I want to be clear that philanthropy is no substitution for fair taxation. It is the most patriotic thing anyone can do, is to pay your taxes. And we can debate how we want to raise those taxes, whether we should raise those taxes, who we're raising it on, but the most patriotic thing you can do is not the Pledge of Allegiance, is not singing the Star-Spangled Banner, but paying your fair share in taxes. And what this budget does is it is a balance. It is a balance between efficiency cuts, which we, Democrats, the majority party, realize that we need to take, but it's also about a fair tax system. And right now, Maryland has an inequitable tax code compared to a number of other states. But one thing we can take pride in, and certainly some that we in Montgomery County take pride in, is our education system. It's our crown jewel. I'm old enough to remember when Amazon was looking for a headquarters too, HQ2. And they were looking at a number of jurisdictions across the world. And they dwindled it down to 20 jurisdictions. 20. Maryland was on that list, and more specifically, Montgomery County. And they didn't say that they put Montgomery County or Maryland on that list because of taxes. That wasn't a part of their excuse. They didn't say that they included Maryland in that list of 20 because of the actions of Democrats in Annapolis. The rationale for Amazon choosing Montgomery County and Maryland is because of our education system. It is because of our educated workforce and our investments in transportation. That's what they listed. Governor Hogan was in office at the time. And he couldn't help but trip over himself, along with members of the minority party, to develop a close to $7 billion, with a B, billion-dollar incentive package to lure Amazon to our state. We can find the energy and the wherewithal to find $7 billion. But God forbid we raise over $1 billion to educate our kids, to make sure we have the best public schools in the country, to ensure that Maryland continues to be competitive, not just with states on the East Coast, but all other 49 states. That's something that we should take pride in. And that's what we're doing today with this budget. It is a sensible balance. If I had my way, I think we should really be looking at other taxes as well, to include private country clubs and golf courses that Maryland taxpayers subsidize. But instead, this was a fair balance. And what you have in this budget is an investment in our future. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, that is what we're doing here, because we're here to govern. My constituents didn't send me here to warm a seat. We're here to make tough decisions, and this budget reflects that. It's a lot of time that we put into this. And we recognize that the only way we're going to get to a strong economy is by ensuring that the budget matches up with our philosophy and our values. And I happen to agree with the minority leader. This is a difference in philosophy and in values. We value public education. I'm a proud product of public education. Every criticism that you have of public education is an argument to make it even better. And I get it. Anything with the word public that prefaces it, the minority party wants to dismantle or to defund. But we're here to make key investments. The same key investments that will allow Amazon and other multinational corporations to look at our state as an ideal investment place. We're here to make tough decisions. And I understand there are members of the minority party who got to make platitudes, talking points, etc. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of what this budget does. It raises taxes on those who can and should be paying more. So in other words, the wealthy and corporations. Amazon didn't cite our tax system as a reason for avoiding the state or even looking at it. So this idea that somehow we're scaring off business is simply not true. Taxes are what we pay for a civilized society. I didn't say that it was a conservative. And some folks may not like raising taxes or voting on policies that raises taxes, but again, we are here to make tough decisions. And as our state population grows, so does the demand for service. And if you think austerity measures is going to get us to a good economy, it is not. The BRFA is sensible. The budget takes into the needs of our most vulnerable communities. We heard at length from the disability community. Don't make these deep cuts. Care about the most vulnerable. And the majority party in this chamber chose to balance the budget on people who can and should be paying more. We didn't do it to the least among us. We didn't do it to vulnerable communities. We didn't do it to communities who couldn't afford it. We did it because we know these are individuals who should have been paying their fair share, but they're not. How many millions of dollars have we lost in our state coffers as a result of us not addressing our inequitable tax code? Millions that we should have otherwise gotten, we didn't get, that could have gone into programs that each and every one of you all care about. I want to see more public schools and new public schools built, not just in my county, but in other counties as well. My good friend from Kent County has been lobbying every single year for construction a new high school in his county. I support that. So let's find the revenue to be able to do that. That's part of our job. That's part of the tough decisions. We're not here for the cameras or to warm seats. We have a structural deficit. And in large part, it's due to the former governor not making the hard decisions that he should have made. And so what is he doing now? He's all over social media making it seem like he left us a surplus. Wrong. Untrue. Not based in facts. It's an alternative fact. There was no surplus that Larry Hogan created on his way out as governor. None. The man is attempting to claim a federal surplus that Biden created as his own. That's what he's trying to do. And there's evidence to that. But we're here not because of social media posts, but to make tough decisions. And that's exactly what we did in this bill. And I encourage my colleagues in the majority party who believe in our public school system, who believe in our transportation network, who believe in building more housing, who believe in investing in our kids and our future, that you will put a green vote up on this board. Because it's easy to criticize, and it's even harder to govern. And it is clear that the majority party is here to govern and not look for some cheap talking points or some platitudes so that we could cut the clip, share it online, and make people feel like we're standing up to the cabal here in Annapolis, when in actuality, what you are doing is voting against a balanced and a sensible budget that takes into consideration not only the most vulnerable, but the fact that we got to make efficiency cuts and we got to raise taxes. This will get us to growth, and it will get us to a place where our public schools are the most competitive and our state is the most attractive to both U.S. as well as multinational corporations. Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I'll be voting green on the bill.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, everybody. I tell you, we definitely competing views and philosophies of what this budget should be and the direction Maryland government should go. And I think we're watching in real time the civilization of Maryland at this point. Every dollar government spends is a dollar they take from the taxpayer. See, Maryland doesn't have a product they sell. And then even when they provide a service, they don't provide a service of worth unless it's unbelievably highly subsidized. Heck, Metro serves a good example of that. 6 years ago, the Maryland budget was $46 billion. This budget here, it's $67 billion. This is unsustainable.
And the person that knows it best sits up on the second floor. When he unloaded his budget this year, I was there, and to tell you the truth, I was impressed. The governor came out and said, you know, the problem, this is a quote, the problem is when you have spending by 70% and GDP growing by 3%, you have a problem, and the only way is to grow your way out of it. Hell, that sounds like it could have came from me. Came from upstairs, from your party. But then the solutions were to offer basically no cuts. They didn't control the spending at all. And I don't see how the largest tax increase in Maryland history helps out economic growth. And this notion that we didn't have a surplus, that's just factually inaccurate. I voted for budgets in the past, my time in Annapolis, and I voted against budgets. 2 years ago, I voted against the budget because it blew through $5 billion surplus. Do you know who else had a surplus back then and now? Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, West Virginia, all our neighboring states. Last year's budget was built on $453 million of tax increases. This one is built on $1.6 billion of tax increases. And we have to start at some point asking what we've gotten for the money. Right now, you have 53% of Marylanders thinking about leaving the state. That's not successful. People don't flee successful places. Ask anyone that's crossing the border now, they're fleeing free health care and free education. In Maryland, we have more people on Medicaid now than I believe in the history of the state. I know the majority party thinks that's a good thing. We've had more people on Section 8 than in the history of the state. We've got so many people on Section 8 and claiming vouchers for their housing, we had to create a state program and fund it $10 million that's in this budget. Keeping people on the government doles, that's not success. Keeping people derived from cradle to grave, that's not success. And what are we getting for all this education spending? Because there's about $1.5 billion more in this budget on education than if you would have eliminated curling completely and kept the 2022 funding formulas. Funny how that works out, 1.6 billion. And for all that money, we've gotten a 48% efficiency rate in reading across the state, a 24% efficiency rate in math, and more people homeschooling their children than in the history of the state. But here's the opportunity. We could fix all those problems. We could fix the growth. You know, a couple of years ago, we passed all this in the name of social justice. We passed all this criminal justice reform, police reform, juvenile justice reform. When you have crime so bad that businesses are putting products behind glass and shutting down because shoplifting out of control, that's bad for business. Bad for tax revenue. How about that? When you have an energy policy that's supposed to be supporting the green energy plan, and it leads to the highest utility costs in the region, well, guess what? That's bad for business. We have an opportunity to fix all that. What we are lacking is the political will to do it. We know the problems. The problems are the activists out in the corner here. Stop listening to them. There's no budget proposal in this chamber that's actually serious unless you look at the two main drivers, which is education and Medicaid. But we don't do that. Somehow we scrape enough money to put a new Department of Social Equity. Can someone stand up and please tell me what that that department is actually doing? Come on. This is what serious chambers do. This isn't what serious works do. Virginia came into their legislative session 45 days in and out and ended with a budget. They fixed their problems. We're just continuing them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate being recognized today. I just wanted to stand to speak against some of the word salad emotional terrorism that we're hearing today. Austerity has been mentioned, and I actually don't think we need austerity. I actually agree with the governor on one point, which the chair of the Freedom Caucus mentioned, and that is you don't actually have to raise taxes to raise revenues. If taxes stay the same and you have economic growth, your tax revenues can go up. But that's not what's happening in our state. What's happened in our state is we've grown spending here in Annapolis by 40% in a matter of a handful of years, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. And what we really need is accountability. And I wanted to talk about some of our expenditures and even some of the discussion here today, which has demonstrated absolutely zero accountability. Remember when the purple line was first proposed? What was the initial price tag? Was that like $2 billion? I think we're at what, over $9 billion? And this kind of illustrates the fact that there is no limit to what we can spend and get a terrible result if we drive this place with zero accountability. How about bridge safety? That's important to the people of my district. It's pretty shocking to hear that those vulnerability assessments haven't been done in 31 years. 31 years. There's a lot to be said there about that number. We couldn't even get an amendment on this budget to deal with that. How about pensions? Remember when we adopted, we took a look, I was a member of Appropriations and I was on the pension subcommittee. I remember that discussion and we said, we're going to make a couple changes and we're going to be fully funded by 2028. One of the provisions we passed was the pension sweeper to make our retirees whole. And that's important because remember what we did with the Maryland State Employees prescription benefit? Well, eventually it was found that we couldn't afford it, so we just took it. One day the people that are in these seats that are standing here are going to say, oh wow, man, we haven't funded the pensions. It's been said that we shouldn't defund things that are important to the people. This budget defunds the pensions. Not only does it defund our pension contributions, it dumps the teachers' pension contributions on the local jurisdictions. How about schools? I was hearing a bill in the Senate, Baltimore County Senate delegation the other day, and they had Councilman Ertel there, and he was talking about, you know, all things Baltimore County. And of course, school issues took up a lot of the debate. And he threw out one number which I wrote down. He said 70% of schools in Baltimore County don't have proficiency standard, they're not meeting proficiency rates in both reading and math. 70% in Baltimore County. Is that the success that we're looking for? Because to me, what we're seeing in our public school system is what we see in this budget and pretty much everything we do, which is zero accountability. On our school system is a massive, massive cost. And I haven't seen in the time I've been here any accountability for our school system. I don't see accountability in most of what we do here, frankly. Look at some of the issues we've talked about here on the floor today. Air conditioning in school systems. We've addressed that in most of Baltimore County. It was mentioned we didn't address that in Baltimore City. I vividly remember fights on this floor where we forced votes to require air conditioners be in every single school in Baltimore City. I don't think we've seen the capital budget. Maybe we can have that discussion again. We could see if we can get some accountability. It was mentioned today that we should take care of the vulnerable. I've been here 11 years. Every year I've brought legislation to deal with the taxation of retirement income. Those folks sitting in those beds The elderly, our retirees, people who represent every district in our state, Republicans, Democrats, all kind of folks, we're all going to retire, and I hope that those folks retire here in the state of Maryland. What's not mentioned is that we fund this budget by taxing the income of retirees. So I think that's pretty sad and unfortunate. So a lot of the discussion we've heard today, frankly, has been a lie. A lot of what's in the budget is a lie. And I think what we're missing here is that you hear the argument we've heard for 100 years now, the rich have to pay their fair share, but that's not what this budget does. This budget, these costs are going to lay squarely on the back of the middle class. And when you go back and you actually talk to people in any district at this point, because taxes hit people equally, you talk to any people and they will say, Maryland is horrifically unaffordable. It's unaffordable to own a home. It's unaffordable to raise children. It's unaffordable to pay the bills. It's unaffordable just to pay your BG&E bill these days. And it's sure as heck unaffordable to retire in. And these aren't the rich and famous. These are average people. And these fees, these business-to-business fees, these aren't business-to-business fees. A lot of these fees are applied to tools and programs that the average everyday person subscribes to. Frankly, multiple of these programs these days. So I think we should do away with the word salad that has become such a feature of this place, and the emotional terrorism, and actually be honest with what we're doing. The taxes in this budget are going to lay squarely on the back of middle-class Marylanders. We should do away with this. We should institute accountability in our spending. I don't want to be here 10 years from now with a budget that's over $85 billion with no results on our policy changes. I think we should speak up and act for accountability for our people, and that's why I'll be no today.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss what's before us, the most important bill we have all session. First thing I'd like to address is the cuts to DDA that a number of speakers have mentioned. I want to remind you that it was Governor Wes Moore that made those cuts to DDA. That was not the Republicans. That was your governor. Secondly, there was some talk about Baltimore City Public Schools. My kids went to city schools. I taught in city schools. My mom, my grandparents. I have a long history in city schools. So in 2013, when I was on the Appropriations Committee, I actually voted for the 21st Century School Building Program. That was a $1.1 billion bill that assured us there would be air conditioning in all Baltimore City public schools. And it said that it would be completed by 2021. So, good sir, if you still have schools without air conditioning, I suggest you call your school system and find out what happened to that $1.1 billion. I'd also like to point to something that Barack Obama said. When he got elected, he said, quote, "Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions, and that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. What should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody. Waste we should be getting rid of even if we didn't have a deficit." I have not seen that. I have not seen anybody concentrating on waste, fraud, and abuse. All we're seeing is taxes being raised. We've heard about cuts, and then when we asked, show us the cuts, show us the cuts, the only cut that could be named in the press conference was, we're not going to fill some vacant positions. So here's the cuts. These are cuts. $419 million less to the rainy day fund. That's not cutting spending. That's skipping a necessary deposit and leaving Maryland taxpayers on the hook later. Leaving 9.5 of state positions vacant, $110 million. That's not a cut. Shifting to teacher retirement costs to local governments, $98 million. That's not a cut, that's a shift. Placeholder savings of $97 million from a quote to be determined supplemental budget. In other words, we promise we'll cut something later. $92.5 million in Medicaid savings by increasing a hospital tax. You're saving money in Medicaid by taxing hospitals. A $50 million moved from cash-funded capital to bonds. Again, we talked about bonds. In this budget, they're bonding electric buses for 15 to 20 years that do not have a life of 15 to 20 years. I guarantee you we are going to have a serious problem with the bond rating agencies when they look at us in May. Eliminating extra pension and retiree health payments of $94 million. That's skipping a responsible funding. It's not cutting waste. Savings from overestimating Medicaid enrollment of $44.5 million. That's a policy change. That's not a policy change. It's a forecasting error. And deleting $100 million from double budgeted Medicaid. That's catching a mistake. It isn't a cut. It's just basic competence. We don't see any waste, fraud, and abuse. We don't see any of that. We see growing government. We have a new Department of Social Equity. The governor has a new department he enacted a year or two ago to create a gap year experience for kids when they get out of high school. That's over 50 state employees and more than $65 million. There are help wanted signs everywhere. You know, they can't find private businesses to participate in that program, so it's a government program that creates government workers and nonprofit workers. That's not a program we need when we're raising taxes. There was a commission that passed out of this body to figure out how to keep deer from crossing the highway. That's not necessary when we're raising taxes. We have a structural spending problem. In 2005, the tax burden per person in this state from the budget was $4,303. In 2025, it is $10,646 per man, woman, and child. That's not per taxpayer. In the meantime, our population has barely grown. You cannot double state spending without growing your population. Look at Florida. They've increased their state budget because they've gotten millions of people to move there. We need to make some serious choices in this state, and that is not what this budget does. And we will be back here next year with more taxes if this legislature cannot get spending under control. For those and other reasons, I will be voting against this budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to kind of bring this back for a moment to kind of the human element of this here. You know, we heard earlier from some that the minority party, that all we care about is the rich and the wealthy and, you know, whoever that might be. But let me tell you a little bit about my background. So my dad is one of 11 children. Okay, he grew up about as poor as you can imagine. Grew up in Baltimore City. How did he get dental care? He went to the dental school to get free dental care at the University of Maryland. How did he get his hair cut? Went down to the barber college there and got his hair cut that way. That's the experience that I had growing up. Everything that I've ever had, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I have several small businesses now. Everything that I've ever had, I've gotten because I worked hard to do so. You know, to the gentleman from Baltimore City, I hear you. And you know, I respect you a lot. I care very deeply about your mom. We've had this conversation before, I think. Your mom was my librarian at school. I care very deeply about her. I care very deeply about everybody in this room. I care very deeply about everyone in Maryland. I'm not sure, though, that these policies are not leaving many of us behind. You know, for the gentleman from Montgomery County, we heard earlier that the most patriotic thing you can do is pay your taxes. Well, I think some of the Gold Star families that I've met with might disagree with that. They might not think that that's the most patriotic thing you can do is pay your taxes. I think that might be a little bit more patriotic to lay your life on your line for the country. You know, we heard that these tax policies, they don't have any impact on businesses. We heard, for instance, that Amazon, they don't consider these things when they're going to come to this state or whether they're going to leave the state or whatever the case might be. Well, I can tell you that's patently not true. You know, my colleague, my seatmate, she and I met with Amazon right before the session started. We have a very big Amazon center at Trade Point Atlantic. What did Amazon say to us? Amazon said in no uncertain terms, very clearly to us, that if you move some of these fees, some of these delivery fees forward, which thankfully are not in this budget, we will no longer expand that facility. So they are paying very close attention to what we're doing. And it's not just Amazon. Businesses are paying very close attention to what we're doing in this state. You know, I represent a very blue-collar district, a very blue-collar district. I was sitting recently with someone, we have one of the largest mobile home communities in the state in my district. Sitting with a lady recently who was just literally crying to me because she can't afford to, pay her electric bill. She can't afford to get her groceries, those sorts of things. These policies are having a real impact on real people. You know, to the gentleman from Southern Maryland who referenced the study from UMBC recently, when 53% of the residents of this state are saying that they're thinking about leaving because of what we're doing, that's real deal stuff. What we're doing here is having a real impact on real people. And I think we need to think long and hard before we continue to just kind of push the green button on more and more taxes. All the states around us, which by the way are not all Republican-controlled states. As a matter of fact, most of them are either controlled by the Democratic Party or they have mixed governments. They've gotten it right. They're either running huge surpluses right now or reducing the size of government or many of those sorts of things. They're getting it right. You know, Virginia's talking about giving a big rebate to their taxpayers. Pennsylvania's talking about giving a big rebate to their taxpayers. Pennsylvania's talking about cutting $1 billion from their budget in a rebate to their taxpayers. These policies that we're doing here in Maryland have an impact, not only on the citizens of our state, but regionally. Businesses can leave. They can go to other places. People can leave. That's what the UMBC study said. People are going to leave. They are leaving. You know, I think that we need to think about, some of the things, the general lady talked about some of the policies of the past, some of the things that we've done. And education is extremely important to all of us in this room. It's particularly important to me. I've got 6 kids. But I'll tell you that I'm not sure that some of the things that we're doing in this budget are getting at the root of some of our problems. Now, I know that I've seen recently the gentle lady from Baltimore City and others are having discussions about things like chronic absenteeism. I think we need to be doing more, frankly, inside of this budget and some of the other things that we've got going on here about that. We can spend as much money as we want in our education system, but if kids aren't inside of schools, it doesn't matter. I have a school in my district, an elementary school, that on any given day, I'm going to say this number, 63% of the kids may not be in the classroom at an elementary school. We're not talking about a high school. We're not talking about where kids are walking in the front door and out the back door. We're not talking about kids that are jumping off the bus. We're talking about an elementary school. It's a big problem. And we can keep on throwing more money at that problem, but until we get at the root of that problem, we won't correct some of these issues that we see with failing test scores and proficiency issues and things like that. We've got real problems. And I think we're glossing over many of those problems in this budget. So for that, I'm going to be voting red. Madam Speaker, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I've heard a lot of people stand up, and we talk about businesses on this floor a lot. But I just want to break it down to this. Businesses are not some faceless, cold thing. Businesses are people. That's all they are. In the state of Maryland, we rank 46th out of 50 in business friendliness. We're the 5th highest taxed personal income tax in the state. So we talk about equity. Well, I have to tell you, 99.5% of all businesses in the state of Maryland are small businesses. They employ 48.5% of everybody in the state of Maryland. So when we pass these things, we affect people, not just small businesses. I stood on this floor 3 or 4 years ago and I brought this stat up, and it still holds true today. Something we should be proud of here in the state of Maryland. In Maryland, 25.4% of all companies are minority owned. Additionally, racial minorities own 38.5% of all businesses in the state of Maryland. So when we talk about equity and throwing these high taxes on people, who are we really hurting? People living the American dream, people that care about the people that work for them, people that took a risk and took a chance, and how do we reward them for employing people and creating tax revenue? We hit them over the head with another hammer that says you're not paying enough. Other people, spending other people's money on other things is one of the most dangerous things a government can do, and that's what we do here. When it's not your money, it's easy to spend. When it's not your money, it's easy to buy favor. When it's not your money, it's easy to buy votes. When it's your money, you care. When it's your service or product you're buying, you care. When it's your service or product that you're putting out in the marketplace, you care. Because you're proud of the business you own. I'm proud of all the minority businesses that have found a way to make it here in this state. But here's the bottom line. Economics is not all that hard to figure out. Money will always follow the path of least resistance. And we are case number one. That's why so many people are leaving. 4th highest migrated state out in the country. Is that because we don't have a beautiful landscape? No. Beautiful mountains, beautiful ocean, beautiful bay, beautiful farms on the eastern shore. This is an incredible state. And how do we reward it? We tax people out of this state. The only reason half of them are staying here now is because their grandchildren are here. That's horrible. I've never, ever had somebody, my hand on the Bible, come up to me and say, I can't wait to retire and move to Maryland. It's never happened. That's sad because we have so much to give here. We have great people. We have great landscape. We just can't wait to push them out the door. And people say, well, they leave for weather. No, they don't. They go to Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, top 3. Their weather's pretty close to ours. This is why I'm not voting for this budget. This hurts everybody, not just small businesses. It hurts every single Maryland citizen. And the facts prove it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to go back 10 years, and a lot of us, or a few of us actually, it was a lot more than that. I think we had the biggest freshman class back in 2014, 2015, and I moved over a couple of seats in committee, but we all started at the very end of those horseshoes in each one of our committees, and one of them's the chair of E&T now. Our comptroller came in that same class. Minority leader came in that same class. And we become friends. You know, we become such friends that we can stand up on the floor and bust each other's chops and not be offended by it because we respect each other, because we understand that what we're doing when we come here to Annapolis is we're representing what we feel is in the best interest of the people back home. And that's the reason why we can get along. But I want to remind folks where we were in the budget 10 years ago. 10 years ago, our budget was $47 billion. And these are important numbers, $47 billion. And ask yourself, do you guys really know what the top line number is in this year's budget? I hope that each and every one of us knows what that number is. $67 billion. Went from $47 billion to $67 billion in just 10 years. It took our state over 300 years to get to $47 billion, only 10 to increase it by another 20. That's a 35% increase in just 10 years. And if we look at the rate of inflation, it's only going up 2.85% per year. There's three reasons why we have a structural deficit. And the warnings from DLS, they were warning us during the Hogan administration, mainly since we passed the blueprint about the structural deficit was coming. We hear about these things either in November or December, about these warnings from DLS during the Spending Affordability Committee briefing. They warned us about these things, about this structural deficit that's coming. And there's three reasons for it. One, during the good years, we were passing bills left and right that had fiscal notes. It didn't matter, we were flush with cash. We've done much better this year, and I'm not sure if the chair of our committee is going to stand up. But a lot of the bills, we've had a lot more fiscal constraint this session, which is great. But we didn't during the good years. And that's a big reason why we're in the fiscal situation that we're in. Second reason is there is some residual federal funding that's been baked into the budget. We still have that. We'll recognize that too. The third reason is the most important reason is why we have our structural deficit, and the reason why we had to come up with $3 billion this year, and why we're going to have to come up with another $3 billion in 2 more years, is because our economy isn't growing at the same rate as our spending. Our economy is not growing at the same rate of our spending. The worst thing we can possibly do now is to raise taxes on the private sector. We're very reliant on the federal government, but we're equally reliant on the private sector. We need private sector growth. The worst thing we can do is take money out of the private sector. The worst thing we can do is discourage private investment in Maryland. That's exactly what this budget does. That's exactly what these tax increases are going to do. I'm very concerned that if we pass this budget, we've had 7 revenue write-downs during the governor's administration so far. 7 revenue write-downs. I'm very concerned that the assumptions that we're making with these taxes, it's not going to materialize. They're not going to materialize because we're not factoring in the fact that Marylanders are smart, business owners are smart. They're going to adjust their lifestyles, they're going to adjust the way they do business because of these tax increases. They're going to go to the consumer's going to spend less money. When they spend less money, guess what happens? Our sales tax revenue goes down, our income tax revenue goes down. That's a fact of life. That's economics 101. That's the biggest concern that I have with this budget in the out years, is that our revenue projections aren't going to come in based on the assumptions that we're making in this budget. And so for those reasons, actually one more thing I want to add. One of the best questions we've had all session long, it was during a press conference about a month ago. And they asked our caucus, well, is there anything that you guys can compromise on? And so I stood up to the microphone and I said, you know, I voted for the budget the last 10 years. We make compromises. You know, there was back and forth. You know, these weren't budgets that if I was in charge, it didn't reflect all my priorities, but it reflected enough where I could vote for it. Whenever we negotiate, we make concessions. And there's a little drawer of concessions. Well, the problem is, for the last 10 years, we've made those concessions. At least I've made those concessions. There's nothing left there. Because the only thing that's left are your core principles. And that's the reason why I can't vote for this budget. Because this budget, for the first time that I've been here, requires tax increases. A lot of tax increases. $1.6 billion in order to balance next year's budget. I can't do that. That violates the core principles that I was sent here before. And I hope everyone on the floor respects that, because those are the same values of the people that I represent on 4 counties on the Eastern Shore. And for those reasons, I can't vote for this budget. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unless the Google machine is wrong, Amazon ended up going to Arlington, Virginia. That's number 1 to correct. I feel like I've been insulted many times today. Tax, 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 tax. That's all we've heard about. That's the moral thing to do. We have to do the moral thing. We are driving business out of the state of Maryland. What we are doing is irresponsible and it is wrong. A former senator was interviewed recently and he said the blueprint is going to bankrupt the state of Maryland, and he's right. Our county is struggling. We can't afford it, and then we just are passing a bill now that we're pushing all kinds of money to make our county pay for it. We can't afford it. So we're going to lose teachers, support staff. We are not going to be able to do all of these wonderful things that the blueprint wants to do. And similar to our minority leader, I really love some of the parts of Blueprint. Workforce development, training children to be successful in career choices, a lot of good things in it. But if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So keep on taxing, tax, 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 tax. And the last business that's left in Maryland, please turn out the lights.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This has been an interesting back and forth, and I've enjoyed it, actually. My good friend from Montgomery County had mentioned the Amazon package. Pardon me. I wasn't here, so I went and found it and looked it up, and it tells a really interesting story, and so I want to share it with you guys who were not here during that time. It was 2018. If you go and pull up the vote list for SB 877 from 2018, it says something really interesting about who our body used to be, how we used to see each other, and the way we used to work together. The final vote for it was 78 to 60. It was the most bipartisan muddling of yeses and nos you can imagine. It's nothing we would ever see again today. It includes, on the no side, almost every member of the Freedom Caucus who was present. In addition, it includes the chair of every standing committee today. Look how we used to be. Well, you may have, sorry, except for the good gentleman from Montgomery County. Sorry, I didn't see your name in there. But Madam Chair was a no. My chair was a no. This chair was a no. That chair was a no. I'm going to tell you why it used to be like that, and it's not like that anymore. Why we're seeing absolutely out of control votes on things like increasing our budget by billions of dollars, even though we're in a deficit, and claiming that we're cutting spending. It's because we redrew all the lines in the state. This was when there was 50 Republicans. There was a lot more working together. A lot more. There was more diversity of thought on the Republican side and more diversity of thought on the Democrat side. There was more friendships, both with each other as Republicans and with Democrats and across the lines. I love you too, even though we agree on nothing, except guns. That's how it used to be. And then we gerrymandered our state so badly in the name of accomplishing Democrat goals. And I know why you did it, because in states that are red, we do it too. And it's not good wherever it happens. Because what ends up happening is we are legislating to a tiny sliver of our state now. We're legislating to a tiny sliver of Democrat voters that only vote in primaries. We're passing policies not on the 80% of benefit to the state, but on the benefit to a sliver of our state. Because I only have a primary. When my primary's done, I'm done, because my district is 95% Republican. Yeah, thank you, but it doesn't benefit the state. Does it benefit me personally? Sure, I kick my heels up in June and I'm done. But I do go work the polls in swing districts, but not y'all's, because I like you. But that's what we've done. We've made it impossible to get along now, because the power has been so concentrated in such a small group whose campaigns are funded by special interests. And I know a lot of you can feel that you're losing your voices now. You can feel it. I know, because like a dozen of you came up to me yesterday to thank me for what I said, and I'm shocked. Not my party, yours. You are losing your voices because of what happens.
It's third reader. We give a lot of latitude, but we're nowhere close to being on the bill here, Delegate.
Yes, well, we can agree to disagree then, sir. Thank you so much for your comment, as usual. The reason we have budgets like this is because of what y'all have done with gerrymandering in our state. The reason we're spending out of control, the reason that we have no ability to rein in things is because you guys have taken over the entire state so that no one is allowed to speak anymore except for the special interest groups and a small minority of people. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse until the Democrats decide they don't want to do this anymore, or enough voters leave the state that it bankrupts us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Real quick, Madam Speaker, there was a lot of conversation about Baltimore City. I get a bit defensive when I hear that. And we talked about our ACs. As of May 1st, 2024, there were 9 schools that did not have AC. As of August 1st, 2024, when school started, or around that time, 4 of those schools did get that AC. As it stands today, there were 5 schools that did not have AC. Those were City College, my alma mater, Furley Elementary in the 45th District, Vanguard, which is also in the 46th, border in the 43rd, City Springs between the 45th and the 46th, and Ben Franklin in the 46th. I don't know if the minority party didn't get the message, but each and every one of those buildings and the AC and heating therein is funded. By the way, those schools that don't have it already installed, it's in the planning phase. City College is going to be moving to the University of Baltimore so that way its historic building can be preserved and the ACs can be put in. Furley Elementary, I have an invitation for June the 4th at 11 a.m. So I would like for each and every member of the minority party talking about ACs to come to the 45th District and help me cut that ribbon. Vanguard, they're moving also to Northeast Middle School in the 45th District, so that way their building can be preserved and they can have AC. City Springs is being rebuilt under the 21st Century Schools, so that way they can have AC. All in the plans, and Ben Franklin, which is the last school in the 46th District, has its AC already. So as we continue to use Baltimore as a punching bag, whether it comes to education, whether it comes to public safety, I want y'all to have a clear understanding that under my mayor, with my partners here in the House of Delegates, with my partners in the Senate, and with the partnership of the leadership of this House, we are getting problems solved for the city, and we are turning the corner for Baltimore City. We're growing, we're doing better, there's going to be growth, and I'm tired. It's old. Get a new talking point. Do not use Baltimore City as a punching bag anymore. It is unacceptable, and it will be called out each and every time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Yes.
Madam Speaker.
Chair Appropriations.
You know, there's a lot to correct here on the floor, and I'm not sure I have the time to go through all of it. First, the truth was told earlier by the gentleman from Appropriations that we have shown extreme fiscal constraint in the bills that we've passed this year. In fact, if you look at the bills and the fiscal notes that have passed the last 2 years, they have been fairly minimal. They've been fairly minimal. It's funny that the minority leader and the gentleman from Montgomery County both talked about years before that problem coming. And it's funny that the one thing that unites us as Democrats here is that we all agree that Larry Hogan was kind of just a slogan. So I'm glad we have a coming together moment. But there was some inaccuracies. The gentleman from Baltimore County called these cuts illusions. That's going to come as a big surprise to his Republican colleagues who got up on the floor yesterday to restore illusions. You know, I'm sure they're kind of offended, Delegate, that he thinks that the cut you wanted to put in for open space is a mere illusion, or that the tourism cut that you wanted to restore is a mere illusion. I'm not so offended. I think maybe he just wasn't paying attention in appropriations, or maybe yesterday, but he also clearly didn't look at the Board of Revenue Estimates meeting or their policy statement, which said very clearly and expressly that Donald Trump has accounted for $600 million of lost revenue in this budget, of cuts in this budget, $250 million of which they took as a preemptive measure in December, $350 million that they took in the March write-down. And Delegate, I don't know, it matches sort of nicely. I don't know, do you know how much the IT services tax raises? $500 million. I think that puts it in perspective. Donald Trump has cost us $600 million this year in ongoing revenue. The IT tax, $600 million and $500 million. But look, let's just kind of talk about the bottom line. The bottom line here is that we have 2 choices before us. We have a hard choice and an intolerable choice. It is hard. Even taxing millionaires, not easy. Certainly, IT services, even with it being only 3%, only half of what we're actually taxing on our sales tax, even with states like Texas doing the same thing, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to do. But what's intolerable is cutting poor kids in their Medicaid. Just because you cut their Medicaid isn't going to get rid of poor kids. The gentleman talked about nurses on the floor yesterday. What you can do for nurses is not have a bunch of poor kids who lose their health insurance showing up to the emergency room sick. That's intolerable. What's intolerable is the Republicans' alternative, right, that they gave us yesterday, cutting education for every kid in the state, but also signaling out some kids, signaling out poor kids for their own cut, signaling out special education, special needs kids. That's intolerable. That's intolerable. You have a choice between what's hard and intolerable today. You know what else is hard? An excise tax. The gentleman from Baltimore County talked about bridges, and a report on bridges. Important. We're going to get a report on bridges, right? It's hard to pass that excise tax to make sure that we actually have bridges that are safe. What's intolerable is unsafe roads and unsafe bridges. Yes, it's going to be hard for me to vote when we get to this BRFA on the excise tax for rental cars. It's hard. It's going to be hard. But what's intolerable is knowing that we will not have the money in the Transportation Trust Fund to make sure our roads, our transit, our bridges are safe for Marylanders. So look, today I'm going to vote a green vote on this budget, and it's going to be hard, but I'm going to avoid an intolerable red vote, and I urge you all to do the same.
Is there any further debate? Not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, to explain my vote.
To explain your vote.
I have a red vote on House Bill 350 and 352 to come, and I don't do that lightly, as I voted for more budgets in this House than I voted against. But I asked myself, what does this budget do to attract businesses to the state? So I looked up in ChatGPT and looked for some of the major announcements in 2025. Hyundai, $21 billion investment, 14,000 jobs, electric vehicle production, and AI. Georgia. TSMC, a Taiwan semiconductor, $100 billion, new semiconductor facilities. Arizona. Schneider Electric, $700 million, 1,000 jobs, energy infrastructure development. Michigan and Texas. CMA, CGM, the shipping giant, $20 billion, 10,000 jobs in U.S. logistics. California and New Jersey. Daymac Properties, $20 billion investment, data centers and real estate projects. Nevada and Virginia. They all have one thing in common. Not one of them are looking to Maryland to locate or expand their business. And ask yourself, what does this budget do to reverse that trend? Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you. To explain my vote, because of the Appropriations Chair, which I have a lot of respect for, just made a couple comments and brought me into it. No matter what you say, you cannot blame Donald Trump for the $3 billion deficit that existed before he took office, number one. Number two, Donald Trump is not taking a vote today on the largest tax increase in the history of the state of Maryland. And number three, you made a comment in terms of, I said, accounting illusions. I didn't say some of these cuts are illusions, but to refer to not funding the rainy day plan as a cut, and the good delegate from Baltimore County named a whole bunch of other ones. It's not an illusion, it's a fact. And I didn't say that there wasn't real cuts, but to say some of these are not, as I would say, an accounting gimmick is why I had to respond. But thank you, and I stick with my red vote.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To explain my red vote, and this is probably obviously not popular as the person in a majority party. And it's taken a lot for me to do this for a couple of reasons. And what came to my mind, and I know it was obviously required to do when I saw the former Governor Schaefer, saw his picture in the lounge, and this morning, again, it kept going over and over in my mind back in 1991 when I was in 9th grade, and he made the statement that the Eastern Shore is the outhouse. And for some of you who are younger, you might not wonder what that is. It's called a shit house. And I stand here because I feel like I don't have a place in this place anymore. I don't. And it's for some of these very reasons in this budget. And I'm going to say this, the Appropriations Committee, you've done an awesome job. You've done your best. You've tried. But what I'm going to say is that it doesn't look like the area that I come from. It doesn't look like what the Eastern Shore is in need of. When we talk about the Rural Prosperity Fund, yes, you say, well, we level funded it. Well, we also cut close to $800,000 of that. And what that equates to is young children not being able to go to a summer program. What it looks like is that Dorchester County is cutting all their summer programs, and they're cutting staff. What it looks like is in Carroll County, another rural county, is cutting 90 people off of their staff. Those things are important. Those things are extremely important to our way of life. Just on the other day, we had a bill for Somerset County. That's not even your county, but you voted against it because it had the word tax in it. Well, it's because they need an ambulance. An ambulance. That's it, period. They don't have them. And it's frustrating to know that when I walked in the door back in 2015, my goal was, wow, to be here to do the people's work, to press the buttons for the people. Now I feel like I'm pressing a button just for anything and everything. And you know what? I'm not going to talk about the budget stuff anymore. And yes, I know that's what the purpose is. I get it. I know the rules of the party, but I will say this. Is that institution is not for everybody.
Point of order.
This institution is not for everybody.
Point of order,
And
Madam
we
Speaker.
are, I'm sure I'm going to be retaliated
Thank you for recognizing
against.
me, Madam
I'm
Speaker.
going to be
you are
removed
over
from something.
your 2 minutes that are allotted to explain your vote. Thank you.
Parliamentarian, I hear you. But enough is enough. When I have an 80-year-old woman call me and say she's sitting there with candles just to light her house.
Madam Speaker.
I'm trying to help
Thank you
her.
for recognizing me, Madam Speaker. The 2 minutes for the young lady are over.
I can count.
But you must sit down. You no longer have the floor.
The one last thing I will say, and I was not trying to be controversial.
Recognizing the parliament.
Thank you, Madam
Is
Speaker.
that
People
this
are allotted 2
institution
minutes to
still
explain
needs to
their
be
vote.
for the
I can
people.
talk louder than you.
Period.
Do you want to do that? Sit down.
All you to do, let's keep calm. Did you had your
2 minutes is up,
Yes,
but the
it is
passion
up.
for the people continues. Thank you.
That from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to vote no today because the people of District 6 demand accountability. I do have a good way to talk about this. I'm glad Baltimore City is going to have air conditioning in all their schools. But if that's the case, if that's accounted for, I don't know why the gentleman from Baltimore City brought that up as a reason to vote for this bill. And if the chair of Appropriations is going to vote for the excise tax increase to protect our bridges, it doesn't explain the fact that we haven't done our job in 31 years, and the people sitting in the seats haven't ensured that job be done in 31 years. So I think we are experiencing a constant circle of gaslighting where we're telling the people of this state we need to heft onto them the biggest tax increases on the middle class that have ever been experienced in this state, when the reality is this body is dysfunctional and we're doing a disservice in overseeing the state government. So on behalf of the people of District 6, I'll be a no today.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. God bless America and the fact that we have the right to do this here today. I heard the number 31, and 31 rings true to me. I've been in business for 31 years, and it is extremely tough to stay in business in the state of Maryland, and it hurts me. It hurts me because for 10 years, I worked as a welder for someone, went to night school, and saved my money to start that business. And the one thing I've consistently seen for 31 years in the state of Maryland is when I work with customers and help build them businesses up, they consistently do the same thing. They leave the state of Maryland. And that hurts small business people like me. And there's plenty of other small business people in this room. They know exactly what I'm talking about. And the key for our state's success doesn't lie in usurping more money from people.
It lies in the fostering of the growth of the small business community. We're not rich people. We have stories. We work hard, we sacrifice, we save. And then we get demonized as if we're super wealthy and we need to give out more money. We are the economic engine that brings prosperity to the state. So this hurts not only my business, but it hurts lots of other business. And I warn you all here today that in the long run, this is going to damage our state and its economy. And that is why I voted against it. God bless us all in the future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To explain my vote, I don't get to say this often, but the gentleman from Baltimore County is right. The job wasn't being done. The Purple Line construction started under the previous governor, and I agree with you, he did not do a very good job. He should have fired people much, much sooner. That project is years behind and billions of dollars over budget because of the prior administration not doing its job. The gentleman and I served on appropriations together our first couple of years here. We were told in 2015 and 2016 by the Department of Legislative Services we did not have adequate transportation revenue coming in, and we were going to have to sort of plateau out on our ability to invest in transportation. We should have done something about it then, but the prior governor chose not to. Finally, a bipartisan infrastructure bill passed at the federal level, and we didn't have adequate funding to make matches for the federal dollars that were available. Now we're in a much tougher position vis-a-vis the federal government, and we're not going to be able to make it all up. There is no way this small but mighty state that the minority leader's son can't find on a Ruby Tuesday's map is going to be able to pay for everything that folks want to pay for. But I'm glad we have a budget where we're at least going to make an effort to invest in infrastructure in all corners of the state, which is why I am voting green on this budget and BRFA. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
You know, I sometimes don't get up here, but I think it's really funny. We have a word out here, that we use a lot. And I've heard it throughout history, and I listened to it all day yesterday. And I think it's interesting that yesterday we got to discuss the budget. That is the first time we got to discuss the budget. I listened to decisions being made that we decided. That was not we, that was you all that decided on these cuts. We never sat down, we never talked about these things. We do get to say some things in committee, but we don't get to discuss the budget until the very last day, which is very disingenuous and very wrong for the people that I represent. And that's why I will be a no on this budget and the BRFA.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's not easy governing, and I don't often get up on the floor, but as my colleagues know, none of us are wild about raising revenues, and I have told many of you that in public and in private. But when I looked in the eyes this morning, I went to the Key Bridge commemoration. And when I looked in the eyes of the surviving families, and I had a chance to see them as they were coming in, and I promised to them and to myself that I will do the best I can do to make sure that our bridges are safe and our roads are safe so that there aren't tragedies. And this is the way that we can do it. We can support a budget that makes sure that our bridges are safe. When I looked in the faces of all my friends with Down syndrome and from the community that were here last Friday, and other vulnerable communities that come and visit us, I vowed to make sure that these communities are protected. This budget does that. It's not a perfect budget. There's lots of things that I don't agree with, but you know what? When push comes to shove, the Appropriations Committee and the Ways and Means Committee did a great job trying to find the compromises to make sure that we protect all Marylanders. Madam Speaker, I am proud to vote for this budget.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I wasn't going to speak today, but I need to share some thoughts for just a moment. When I was a young kid, my mother said actions speak a lot louder than words. So I'm going to speak real quickly. My constituents in District 6, my schools in District 6, we are in a poor area. My taxpayers in District 6 cannot afford to pay their taxes. My heart goes out to these folks. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know that through the interim, we're going to be working very, very hard in appropriations to do something different for next year, because I feel like we could cut our fees and raise the tax for a penny. Cut out the fees. I've been to several events over the last 3 weeks, And people have said, don't raise fees, don't raise taxes, just don't do it. My next door neighbor, who's been there for many, many years, said, Rick, if they raise one more fee, I've got to go. I've got to move in with my kids. Ladies and gentlemen, my red vote is speaking for my community. God bless you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Explain my vote.
Explain.
So earlier today, I got up and talked about Dorchester County and the effects that this is having. One of the things I forgot to tell you is despite every effort that we're trying to make in Dorchester County, we're still faced with either a 15 to 18% property tax increase because of the actions of what we've done here in this body and how we're trying to adjust to that. I don't make $500,000 a year. I don't make $1 million a year, but I just taxed myself. I taxed my neighbors, white, black, poor, rich. We're taxing everybody in Dorchester County and all of my counties by the actions of what we've done, and because of this budget. For that reason, I'm still red.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
To briefly explain my vote, I am filled with gratitude for this budget because of the fact that the gentlelady is right. I seldom agree with her, but the gentlelady from Baltimore County is right that the proposed budget cuts were to DDA were very problematic. And thanks to the work of my good friend from College Park and my dear friend from Kensington, people with disabilities will have the support that they need, and students like me, kids like me with CP will have adequate special education resources. And, you know, like yesterday, a colleague in the minority party talked about the electoral consequences that we may face for this vote, but it's worth it to me to potentially pay a price so that an adult with CP can have their diaper changed, so that a woman with Down syndrome can have a job coach, so that a guy with autism can have somebody drive them to the doctor, and so that somebody like me had the opportunity in special ed to do the GTLD program. So I'm willing to pay the price because I didn't come just to say I was a delegate. I came to make a difference and make hard choices, and that's exactly what we're doing today, thanks to the extraordinary work of the Appropriations Committee Chair and the gentle lady from Kensington.
To explain my vote.
Explain your vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, the Republicans were not planning to cut DDA funding. That's not what we put in our amendments. There's a way to balance this budget without raising taxes, with still taking care of our most vulnerable. It can be done, and we know that because it's done in every state that touches our border. So just a reminder, you can actually take care of those who need to be taken care of without taxing the crap out of everybody else. It was mentioned that it was Hogan's fault that our transportation plans on the Purple Line were out of control, but I'm pretty sure he's not the one that drafted the projections that were off by billions of dollars. I'm pretty sure those folks are still running things. My district is so tired. When I door knocked, I can't tell you how many doors I hit that said, "Oh, darling, I would love to vote for you, but I actually live in Florida now." That's right. They live in Florida now. They were in Maryland, but they don't live in Maryland. They don't pay taxes in Maryland. And that is because of stuff like this and stuff like the BRFA. And it's going to be more and more and more and more until you won't have anybody left to tax. So who's going to pay for all this fun stuff? I shudder to think what 10 years from now is going to look like. And Lord willing, I won't be sitting on the floor listening to it.
Clerk will take the call. There being 100 votes in the affirmative, House Bill number 350, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 352, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2025.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Yes. Let him do, yeah. Just chill. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, we just had a lot of debate on the budget that really did bleed into the BRFA. So I'm not going to try and rehash details, but I do just want to level set and pull us back into context for what's going on here. We have 141 members, and it's not going to be possible to please every single person on every item of the budget and tax package here. And I just want everyone to consider that for a second. Madam Speaker, the Appropriations Chair, we've heard so much feedback, additional late feedback here on the floor, and a lot of it has been good points. I just want to be very clear about that. The minority is not being ignored. We listen to you. I say this to you in private and in public, that when you bring these points up on the floor, sometimes I'll tap the majority whip and be like, they're making a pretty good point. And we file this information into our deliberation process, believe it or not. But look at where we are. We have billions of deficit. There's been a lot talked about how we got here. We all have a hand in this. We're all cooks in that problem, and we all do have responsibility and accountability to take for how we get out of here. So I want to be very clear. There are billions in cuts up front that have already been put. You want to define it as $1.5 billion or 2.3, that's fine if you don't want to count one-time transfers. But we're dealing with it. But why do we have to do more? Well, it's been told to us by the bond rating agencies that we're in danger of having a bond downgrade, which would make all of the borrowing we do cost a lot more for us not getting anything else for it. So it's a huge risk to the state to not deal with this. And what are they saying? For good or for bad? I've been saying this since the beginning of session. Maryland is a company town. When you look at the devastation in Michigan, when an auto plant shuts down, we are looking at multiples of those happening in every corner of the state, every corner. It's the FEMA training center in Frederick County. They just pulled the plug. No more wildfire training happening in Frederick County. Research grants now, 2,000 job losses in Baltimore from Johns Hopkins. Woodlawn Social Security cuts on the Eastern Shore. Assateague, the Cumberland C&O Trail, everyone is facing layoffs in every corner of the state. And Moody's is telling us Maryland is uniquely exposed to this risk, and we must do something. You're getting more cuts here than we started with at the beginning of session, and as the Chair of Appropriations noted, at least $500 million of that is coming from the White House. But all of these estimates have really just been looking at the initial direct losses from public sector employees. Every time one of these agencies closed, it's brought millions and billions in cuts to ancillary research grants, contract spending, and our private contractors are feeling this. They are feeling it. So what is the BRFA and budget debate really about? It's been said somewhat deridingly by some in the minority party during these floor debates that they don't think government has a role helping people. They said it's a scary thought when someone says, hey, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Well, I would like to flip that on its head. I would propose to you that the BRFA and the budget debate this year in particular for Maryland, it's especially about government helping people. We're about to have a ton of people needing our help. Again, in every corner of the state. Every week that I look at the unemployment insurance rolls in Maryland, they are doubling. And Medicaid coverage, I know you guys like to think about that as some poor people's urban program, but I hate to break it to you, there are people in Western Maryland and on the shore that are counting on us to provide that subsidized health care, and they will lose it from what I'm seeing the federal government is proposing. And no, it's not in the name of deficit reduction. So we have to do something. We have to make tough decisions, and I concede to you, I don't want to see cuts to program open space. I don't want to see any of these cuts, but we're making cuts. We didn't want to do it. The revenues, believe me, my name was on one of those bills, the big bad one that everyone's been talking about. When I talk to the committee chairs, they can tell you, I lost sleep the last couple weeks over this thing. I'm not sure. I don't know, but we are running out of choices, and we have to do something. So you can look and blame and point fingers all you want. We've all been sitting here. We've been sitting here taking these votes, looking at the same projections, looking at the out year. We all had the opportunity to introduce bills, but the time is here. Last year, we tried to push this conversation. Many didn't want to have the conversation, so here we are at even more unfortunate timing. It is what it is. But this is the job we asked for. We have to pull up our pants and do something about it. This is the plan before you. And when you look at the context of the last few years and the other challenges we had to rise to, I don't want to hear this government has nothing to do. Today's the anniversary of the bridge collapse. One of the people that doesn't want any of this budget and BRFA package to pass is saying the government needs to be doing more to monitor what's going on with that bridge. I agree. I think we're going to take care of that problem. It's been promised to you. But that's the government. The workers, they need our help. We passed bills this year and last year to help those workers. The private businesses, they demanded we get that up and running ASAP. Why? Because the freight rail, the ports, the shipping, the airport, all of the ancillary businesses, the warehousing that's going on here, everyone needs the government to get its act together and keep our infrastructure running so that we have a state economy. And when the feds almost pulled $1 billion out from under us before the White House was even sworn in, it was an emergency, a huge emergency that Team Maryland spent hours and hours on the phone trying to figure out what to do. And that's from a single infrastructure project. How about you back up even a couple years before that? Where were we? We were out of the pandemic, so to speak, but we were facing worker shortages across the board. Restaurants didn't have servers. I remember going out to Hancock, Maryland, and eating at a restaurant, and I didn't get served during this period because they had no servers. Every corner of the state saw this. School bus drivers, nurses, no one had workers. Private businesses and the public sector and all of our constituents demanded we do something. So what did you see coming out of this? You saw health care protections, Medicaid protections. You saw child care scholarship programs, all of the things that folks said we needed to do to put people back to work to make our private industries function. This was the function of a government. And this very role of government is being undermined every single day by what the White House is doing. I know nobody wants to acknowledge it, but Moody's is telling us this is a crisis for the state, uniquely for Maryland. And while we like to point to our neighbors, I hate to break it to you, multiples of our adjacent neighbors are facing structural deficits, and our friends in Virginia are none too pleased by what's going on in Washington and their own exposure to it, and are expecting a regional recession. So I assure you, we will not be alone in having to address these problems. So I apologize to all of the Marylanders who are forced to make sacrifices for what's going on here today. I really do. But the concept that this budget and this BRFA is for primary voting Democrats, it's insulting to all of us. That is not what this budget and this BRFA is about. And we are all about to learn this, unfortunately, when all of our constituents from across the state, in both the public sector and the private sector, come to us for help. This is tough stuff. But this is the most important vote we're going to take potentially in this 4-year term, and we're leaving ourselves with a cash cushion when we leave here. And it's going to help the state respond economically to the ongoing crises facing us. I wish we were not here, but this is where we are. And so this BRFA vote, along with the budget, it's Civics 101. This is about whether you believe the government should help people in their time of need, as we have been doing every single year we are down here. Please stick with us. Thank you.
Any further debate?
Madam Speaker.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say something very briefly about that. I want to read something to you. A great man once said this: the largest single barrier to full employment of our manpower and resources into a higher rate of economic growth, parentheses, that's what the governor of the state and I and a lot of you believe is what's necessary, is the unrealistically heavy drag of income taxes on private purchasing power, initiative, and incentive. Every dollar released from taxation that is spent or invested will create a new job and a new salary. Great man said that. Wasn't from my party. His name was John F. Kennedy. And he said that, and his policies unleashed an era of economic growth and prosperity in America. Because Democrats didn't used to believe that we could just tax everybody and that created an economy. And they didn't used to believe that the government was the primary industry of America. In fact, in the state of Maryland, the state of Virginia, in the 1960s and 1970s, the government was not the primary industry of the state of Maryland or the state of Virginia. But my goodness, that's where we're at now. My friend, my real friend from Montgomery County is correct. We are uniquely positioned to suffer from a retrenchment of the federal government. That does not mean that a retrenchment of the federal government is wrong for the citizens of the United States of America. Because could you imagine, and I've said this before, I look around the room, I know a lot of you would really like to be in Congress. You can't fool me. But at the end of the day, could you imagine serving there where you're like, we're just voting on stuff, I don't know. We got a $17 trillion deficit on that one. Who cares? We got this, we're doing tax cut over here, we can't afford it, we're spending more money than we've ever spent over there, we can't afford it. We don't do that. We do have to sit here and take tough votes and make tough decisions. They don't in DC. They don't. They play on Fox News and MSNBC like they do, but they don't, because it's funny money until it's not. And we're reaching a point in the United States of America where it's not, and there is a movement afoot among the 50 states, may not jibe with our state, but among the 50 states, to retrench federal spending, federal employment that has grown at exponential rates. You heard the quote earlier today, our spending in Maryland, and that's not a quote from us, that's a quote from Governor Wes Moore, our spending over the last several years has grown at roughly 70%, while our GDP has grown at roughly 3%. I'm not an economist, no one here is to the best of my knowledge. That does not work. You cannot tax your way to prosperity, and by voting to do this, again, the largest tax increase that anyone that's ever walked into this room has ever voted for, you're a minute or two away from voting for it. Think about the repercussions of that rather than just, I want it because I want to pay for stuff. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. Think about that for a second. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. What's that mean when we talk about taxes? That means there's no tax in a silo. Every single tax, every single item that's in this BRFA has a ripple effect. A couple numbers I want to read. 45, 46, and 44. Maryland is 45th in personal income tax rate. We're 46th in business climate. And we're 44th in new business applications. What's that say? That's not because of the rich. That's not because we're not taxing the rich enough. That's because we've created a non-competitive business climate. It's interesting, we talk about the impacts of what's happened in Washington, D.C. on the state. Well, what's that say? We've made ourselves too dependent on government. What's our solution? Make more government. More government is not the solution to government. We are feeling right now, we are debating the points of the majority party on this BRFA and this budget is the impacts of government and how we're losing government. And we're seeing the impacts throughout the state, for sure, right? Doesn't mean, to the minority leader's point, doesn't mean it's a bad thing for the United States of America, maybe a bad thing for us. But we are now feeling the effects of total dependency on government, and now we want to create more of that for our citizens. That's not the answer. I hear a lot of conversation about we're asking people to pay more. We're asking counties to pay more. We're asking other people to pay their fair share. I don't see an ask in here. I see mandates. I see requirements, right? I see people going to jail if they don't do what we tell them they're going to do by paying more money to government. That's not an ask, right? I see the counties right now paying $1.4 billion above their requirement for the blueprint right now. I see us transferring $100 million in teachers' pensions to the counties. And what's our solution to help pay for that? Not that the counties have a ton of money. We're authorizing them to raise income tax locally too. So this budget and this BRFA is hitting people not just at the state level, but the county levels and the local levels. The gentleman from Cecil County talked about it yesterday. The municipalities in Cecil County are now having to look to raise revenues because the counties can no longer afford to subsidize the partnerships with the towns. They're getting hit everywhere. And then they're going to get a hit on the business side, right? Because the business have to pay for this. And we've acknowledged the fact that higher taxes on businesses have a negative impact. Otherwise, the business-to-business services tax would not have been stripped down to just digital services. By stripping out those other provisions, we've acknowledged that taxes do have a negative impact. Otherwise, we'd be debating a full B2B services tax on services throughout the state. So we've already acknowledged that happened. But we wanted to find a narrow path that, again, with this digital tax, this rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. If you're buying software in your cell phone, you're going to get dinged, right? If you're using services for a small business, you're going to get dinged. If you're using services for a big business, you're going to get dinged. And where does that end up? That ends up at the people we say we're trying to protect, the lowest income folks. It all trickles down. I don't care if you're a grocery store. I don't care if you're a local market. I don't care if you're heating, plumbing, housing. This hits every single industry equally, and it all lands in the heads of the lowest income earners, and there's no way to avoid that. That's math. That's the reality. And how do we know that? One of the reasons we know is in the business-to-business services tax, before it was stripped out, all the way down to what we have now, 430 Maryland businesses signed up in opposition to one person in support. 430. 126 people showed up. And in addition to our local mom and pop shops, it was the household names, right? It was McCormick, right? It was Under Armour. We can go on and on. We don't need to relitigate that. And we're also doing more and more damage to so many folks in our state. We are de-incentivizing $6.7 billion in charitable donations that directly impact the lowest income earners in our state, the most vulnerable people. We're talking about tax cuts for special needs. We're now threatening the livelihood of organizations that support special needs, developmental disabilities, low-income folks, food insecure. We can go down the line. This BRFA and that provision in the BRFA to prevent $6.7 billion or to de-incentivize $6.7 billion in charitable donations is exactly what that does. That's exactly what that does. We talk about how we want to eliminate the black market in different industries. Increasing cannabis tax from 9% to 12% encourages and grows the black market, right? Increasing taxes on sports gaming encourages the black markets. People would rather go to illegal online gaming sites, right, than bring that into the light. Obviously, we talk about local taxes, vehicle taxes. There's a lot of conversation in the budget in the BRFA that we talk about the fact that there's going to be a tax cut for so many Marylanders. That amounts to about $50 per year per person. You register one vehicle, the whole thing gets wiped out, right? We can talk about individual provisions in this BRFA, but we need to consider it the net effect, what it does in its entirety. And that's what it does in its entirety. I know this isn't easy. It's hard for us to face all of our folks, right? Another thing that we're not doing with this, right? freeze on hiring new jobs, right? Freezing hiring new government employees, which we need to do. Why do we need to do that? To protect the existing government workers. We saw in 2009, 2010, when the O'Malley administration had to roll out a bunch of furloughs as a result of the financial situation of the state. We're going to be staring down the barrel of that again, without question. Unfortunately, this isn't doing what we hope it's going to do. This is creating more taxes at the local level, more taxes on the state level, more taxes for low-income families, more taxes on middle-income families, more burdens on all of them, less incentives to support the charities that help them. This is going to hit low and middle-income Marylanders from every single solitary direction. And I think it's self-evident that I'll be voting red on the BRFA. And Madam Speaker, thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Subcommittee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've had a lot of debate today and yesterday, hours of debate about the state of Maryland's economy, about the state of our business climate, and that's a good thing. That is one of the important things that we do as a body, is to think about our economy and where our economy is growing. And I'll say, in spite of the doom and gloom picture that we've heard today, and in spite of the advice of one member of this body for businesses to literally leave our state and to not come to our state, I want to remind people of the facts of where Maryland's economy is at right now. Maryland, according to the most recent data from the federal government, has had 3% growth in GDP. That's on par with the nation as a whole. If we look back into 2023, 2024, Maryland has outpaced the nation as a whole in terms of growth in our economy for 4 consecutive quarters. We have a lower unemployment rate than the nation as a whole by far. We've outpaced the nation as a whole in terms of labor force participation. Maryland is among the best states in the United States in terms of having highly skilled workers. We rank 5th among all states for the percentage of our residents who have a bachelor's degree or higher. We rank 3rd for the percentage of our residents who have a graduate or professional degree. And we're home to one of the leading biotech hubs in the nation, which includes part of my district, in the county that I represent. And in terms of pace of new businesses opening, Maryland right now, the data from just last month, Maryland is outpacing Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, DC, and the US as a whole in terms of the growth in new businesses starting up in our state. Now earlier, we heard from my good friend, the minority leader, about that we're not in a vacuum, and he's exactly right. We aren't in a vacuum. But if we're gonna talk about uncertainty and in the current business climate, we got to look at another level of government here, because the uncertainty is undoubtedly coming from the federal government. We can look to the massive tariffs announced by our president that were then announced and then postponed. We can look at the tens of billions of dollars in Inflation Reduction Act funding that was frozen, including money that would have gone to businesses and to farmers. We can look at the federal agencies and programs that were illegally closed and then reopened by the courts. And that's not even to get into the impacts on federal workers, many here in our own state, that have been affected by these actions. And the US economy is already responding in a negative way to these actions by the federal government. Just look at the news headlines from recent days, from the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Consumer confidence drops further. Key measure flags recession risk. Just this morning, a couple of hours ago, Wall Street Journal. Corporate America's euphoria over Trump's golden age is giving way to distress. Forbes yesterday, consumer confidence plunges to 4-year low as recession anxiety resurfaces. And earlier this month, CNN, American businesses are getting nervous about hiring more workers. And unfortunately, these impacts aren't just going to affect us here in Maryland. Every state in our nation is going to feel these impacts. Now, we can't control what our president and what this administration does, but we can put our own fiscal affairs in order as a state. And that is exactly what we are doing with this legislation. I feel very confident that the actions, particularly the revenue actions that we are taking in this legislation, are very much in line with what other states are doing, and we are on very sound policy footing. Because we are not inventing new things here. The things that we are doing in this legislation, multitudes of other states, including some of our neighboring states, have already done. They've already taken these actions. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we are making our tax code fairer. We are making our tax code fairer for our middle class residents by asking the wealthy few to pay a little bit more. And we are leveling the playing field for our small businesses by closing the corporate tax loopholes that some of the largest corporations in our country and in our world have been exploiting for decades. So I'm going to be proud to be voting green today, not just to make our tax code fairer, not just to protect our most vulnerable residents from very deep and harmful cuts, but also because we are continuing to invest in the key areas that our businesses depend on in order to grow our economy, being education and transportation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you. I stand in opposition of this entire budget package this year. And the main thing, like many of my colleagues have mentioned, is I think the state has gone too far this year and pushed too much of its debt onto our local counties and city. And what that means is that you're just looking at the tax increase that we're doing here, but by pushing the debt to the local jurisdictions, they're going to have to raise fees and taxes. And so I think you need to realize that not only what you're seeing here, and you're talking about, you know, only the 3%, what have you, no, it's going to be more because we're pushing our debt onto the county because we cannot get our spending under control. So I will stand in support or in opposition of this BRFA and also with the budget. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to oppose this bill, but I'm really interested in the vote count that's about to come up. I want to thank the young lady from the Eastern Shore that had the courage to stand up and vote against it, because I've said numerous years on here, and we've heard it from the Appropriations Committee before, that we're required to have a balanced budget in Maryland. And if you vote for the spending on the budget, you got to vote, you should intellectually be honest enough to vote for the tax increases in the BRFA. And I'm proud that all the members of the minority party stood up and voted no on the budget. Now, I'm kind of wondering how many people are actually going to vote for the largest tax increase in Maryland history. Because if you vote for one and not the other, that's like going to the restaurant, ordering your meal and eating it, and then dashing out on the check. So I'm super excited to see how many votes actually light up on the board, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, apparently people want to hang around here. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise just to make a correction from the majority leader, who's again blaming Donald Trump. But the rating agency said that Moody's downgraded the state's outlook from stable to negative, citing concerns about looming structural deficits driven by programs including the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Education. So Donald Trump wasn't in office, and he has no vote on the blueprint, and this budget does not address that looming structural deficit because of that. Additionally, the outlook revision was driven by expected structural imbalances and planned depletion of general fund surplus and budgetary reserves by 60%. So I will remind you that Governor Hogan did leave $4.2 billion in the reserve fund, and that's for a rainy day, and it's raining, and they spent it. So we could have weathered this downturn from the federal government if that hadn't been spent. Additionally, I'd like to talk about the Medicaid cut. As you know, I do read the budget, I do read the bills, and on page 232, this budget cuts Medicaid by $100 million. I'm sure it's replanted back in there by a tax on the hospitals for $100 million, but this cuts Medicaid. That would be the majority party. Finally, I'd like to remind you of what you're voting on. The largest tax increase, largest part comes from this capital gains surcharge, But the second largest increase in taxes in this BRFA comes from from vehicle owners. $365 million in taxes on middle class Marylanders and seniors. And when I had breakfast with my mom, who's a senior, she was shocked at how much her registration fee increase had gone up. This is hurting seniors. The third highest tax is the income tax that the good delegate from Montgomery County thinks you should all pay more of. There's also a gaming tax, a sales, there's a tax on cannabis, which I'll remind you in California, when they raised the tax on cannabis, it drove the black market. So I hope that doesn't happen here. Vending machine tax, and the one tax on here I agree with you on would be the film production activity tax credit. You took some of that away. You could have taken all of that away and we probably would have agreed with you. And it drives up local income tax. That is what is going on here. It is raising taxes, although the talking point is it won't raise taxes on 94% of Marylanders. That's a gimmick. The second highest tax increase is on people who drive cars. And that is, what, 95% of the people in this state. So for that, I will be voting against this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You all came up. Chair of Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't going to stand just because I am the chair of the committee, but I feel like I should. There's been a lot that's been said today, and I'm just going to talk. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to get emotional. I know emotions are running high. But I want to start out by saying I'm a proud Marylander. I was born and raised in Howard County. I live in Howard County. I had a little stint in Montgomery County, but don't claim me. I'm back in Howard County, where I'm raising my kids. And I love Maryland. This is a great place to live. It's a great place to send my kids to school. My family lives here. The services are great. And I really enjoy living here. Traveled lots of places, but I will never live anywhere else. I just won't. And so we have some tough decisions to make. And this is hard. I told people coming into the session, this is a great year to be chair of Ways and Means. But you know what? I'm honored. I am honored, and thank you, Madam Speaker. I am honored. I am honored to chair Ways and Means Committee. I am honored to stand with Madam Speaker. I am honored to stand with the chair of Appropriations and do the hard work that we did, because this was hard. It was a lot of work, and it was hard. But it was the right thing to do. I'm going to be proud to put up my green vote because I know it's the right thing to do. I was part of that class in 2014, 2015. My colleague from the Eastern Shore mentioned, I think it was a very large class, 60 some of us. I was part of that class. When I walked in here, I didn't know anything that went on in the Budget Committee. No clue. Transportation Trust Fund, General Fund, BRFA, I'm like, what are we talking about, people? Now I very, very well much know. But I had great people to look up to, like Maggie McIntosh, like Madam Speaker, who stood here in difficult times and made the hard decisions, because that's why we're here. We are here to sit in these seats and make tough decisions. That's why we all ran for office. That's why we knocked on thousands of doors, some of us while we were pregnant. So it is an honor. It is an honor. When I say it is an honor to walk through these halls every day, it is an honor, and I do not take it lightly. Today, I follow the lead of Madam Speaker and former Chair McIntosh, and I understand, and I understand, and I'm thinking about the bigger picture. And they used to say, and I want to get it right, the budget was right thing to do because it was both fiscally responsible and socially prudent. I got it right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it was in those moments that I learned that being a leader in this body is doing the hard things. It's not standing up, making a fuss. It's not being on social media all the time, getting these sound bites. It's making the hard decisions for people because it affects their everyday lives. And so we're here, and I believe this vote is right because I believe with all of my being it's right to fully fund the 4th year of the blueprint. So every child in every zip code, you've heard me say this multiple times, so that every child can have an opportunity to succeed and to be successful. I know it's right to support developmental disability service so people can live with dignity and independence and the resources that they deserve. I know it's right to invest in Maryland's private sector so we can grow the economy, and I understand that some of you think that this is contrary to that, but it's not. And we are working towards those goals in the Economic Matters Committee, in the Ways and Means Committee. And I know it's right to fully fund grant programs that protect victims. I know that is the right thing to do. I spent 7 years in Judiciary Committee doing that. That is absolutely the right thing to do. And I know that when we do all of these things, it makes Maryland and continues to make Maryland the great place that it is to live today. And some are concerned, why would businesses want to come here? They would want to come here because we want their families to live here. Let's stop pitting businesses against the community because we are all part of this community. My father's been a business owner, and I worked for him since 1981. He has been here in Maryland all of that time. That doesn't mean he agrees with everything that we do, but he knows that this is an amazing place to raise a family, and yes, be here to see his grandkids play football and basketball and dance and all the things. So no, they aren't going anywhere. This BRFA, Madam Speaker, is about putting our values into action, and my green vote is doing just that, and I hope that all of my colleagues join me in doing that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Yes.
Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Budget your values. Many of you may feel that they are. We spent 7 hours debating that yesterday. That was not the easy way out. There is nothing easy about legislating from a super minority position. And I get asked all the time, back in my district, why do you do it? And I do it for days like yesterday, and I do it for days like today. I am fighting for the literal survival of our state and fighting for my constituents to be able to stay in the place they love. I think that we very thoughtfully presented amendment after amendment to try to make a better budget and build a better economy for our state. And it all comes down to this for me. Like many of you, I balance my life here and my life at home. And so I do. I try to still work. And I talk to people. When I'm at home, I talk to people all the time. And every day now, every time I talk to someone, they are saying to me, the conversation goes something like this. I have lived in Maryland my whole life. My family wants to be able to live around here, but they can't afford to buy a house. I am retired. I live on a fixed income. And for the first time, I am going to have to leave the state I love. These are real people with real conversations that I literally have every single week in my district. They just can't afford it because of the way we are budgeting, financing our state is saying that we don't value the families that live here. When you go home, you're also going to get asked this: why are my kids' class sizes so high? Why are we losing our virtual school, our music program, our outdoor school? Why are they being cut? We didn't ask yesterday to cut education funding levels. That was not what we did. We asked for a pause so that we can reevaluate where we are, and while continuing the inflationary spending. And so let's talk about where we are. Let's talk about special education and how the cuts that we're saying, that were said that we were going to make. No. From my school system's budget, the cost of special education in 2021 was $56 million. Now they are spending in this budget cycle, $97 million. Does that sound like anyone is cutting special education? No, but what is happening is that we're pushing it back to the counties. And as every Board of Ed member who was serving in the boards of ed and now serve in this house, what did we do with non-public placements? Let's talk about that. Non-public placements, the usual share for counties was 30%. That is some of the highest, most vulnerable kids that we can't serve in our school systems. So they have to go to a non-public placement, of which that school system has absolutely no control of the tuition. Now, in this budget, we're pushing that county cost to the counties back another 10%. So they'll have to pay 40%. And then in 27, we're going to push it another 10%. So they have to pay 50%. And then while we're on that, let's talk about teachers' pension. I was on the Board of Ed in 2013 when we pushed pension back to counties, and our counties are paying for their share of the teachers' pension. They pay that amount in. Why did we push that back to the counties? We pushed that back to the counties because the state said at that time that we're not going to continue to fund when the counties are outpacing with the salary increases that they negotiate what the state can afford to pay for. So what are we as a state doing now? We as a state now are mandating that we raise those salaries, which changes. It's not just a minimum $60,000 salary for a 10-month employee. That changes the entire scale of the school system, which is outpacing our pension costs that we can afford. And on top of that, if you add the national board certification and what that does to pension, it adds an extra $10,000 to $17,000 at the start. And so why? We're not pushing that back to the counties. They are going to pay that. What we're pushing back is a mistake that we made because we didn't account for the pension costs. We assumed when we made our actuarial assumptions, we assumed a state average salary of 2.7%. That is a flat. We did not take the blueprint into account when we made those assumptions. And so that's why counties are now paying almost $100 million. DLS wanted them to pay $197 million back to the counties because of a mistake we made, and my colleague was right about that yesterday. That's what's getting pushed back to the counties. And let's talk about education scores. As the minority leader was saying, in 2013, we had scores of 2nd and 6th in reading, 16th and 20th in math. Now, in 2024, we are 20 and 21st in reading, and that is because of the good work of the scientific-based reading. And in math, we are 39th and 38th. And so maybe if we had just spent more money. 2013, we spent an average per pupil amount of $13,829. In 2024, it is $18,000. $18,000, and it is much higher in some areas of the state. Over $20,000, $23,000, $22,000, $25,000 a student. So we just asked for a pause at those current levels to see if we can sustain them, to see if all of this stuff that we're pushing back to our counties is going to make our schools actually better, or if it is going to actually dismantle them. That's what we asked for. So, what does this budget say about our values? It says that we're balancing this budget on the backs of our businesses, large and small, our families and our counties. And I heard in my committee, hearing after hearing, about how important business innovation and attraction is to grow the county and to grow the economy in Maryland. This budget says Maryland is closed for business, and it will make Maryland unaffordable for lifelong Maryland residents, the very families that built this state. So I will be a no vote on this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I just have a few comments. I think the debate has been very interesting, but I think we're missing something. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And I know that, and probably my chair would agree with that. Anyway, I think that what we need to do is take a little bit of a pause. We probably should have had a rather lean budget. And then I think we have wonderful assets in the state of Maryland. We have great institutions. We have some of the best medical people in the world. We have great banking system. We have a lot of institutions like T. Rowe Price that manage money and different portfolios. We have sports experts. We have we have the Ravens, we have the Orioles, we have a lot of cultural places, as well as we have some great learning institutions. So what I think would be good is maybe we need to assess where we are right now. And I know you can say, well, our committees know everything. Well, they don't. Because we haven't really heard from anybody like an Augustine Commission lately. We haven't had some of the economists that are with our different colleges come in and kind of give us some advice and say, okay, if Moody's is having some issues with us, what can we do to shore up? I mean, obviously we have to have a balanced budget, and I respect that. But I just think that there's an ability to have a convening of getting people that are very educated to come in and help us do the right thing, and something that both the right and the left can agree on. I don't think raising taxes is going to help. I don't think it's going to help the elderly in my district because they want to be able to stay at home. But if their property taxes keep rising, they're not going to be able to do that, and then they're going to have to sell the house or have a reverse mortgage, and it's going to cause all kinds of problems for them. And I think the fact that we are pushing the property taxes onto the counties without their having any knowledge except this is what was proposed in January and becoming a reality now is not really necessarily fair, because for many years it was 50-50, and I don't think that's that now they're going to have to pay for the assessments. For the teachers, now it was 50-50, and now it's going to be 90% of the teachers' pensions. So I just think that maybe we should try to just have a nice, neat little budget, but not this. So that is why I cannot vote for this, because I think we haven't really done enough due diligence. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote?
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To explain my no vote today, it's been said of the minority party that we don't want the government to do anything, and I think for the people that we represent, we really just want the government to do its job. We have bridges we don't keep safe, pensions we don't keep funded, and school systems that aren't delivering on proficiency numbers, and we're now telling our people that we're going to pay teachers to not be in the classroom. I think the real problem with this budget and overall what we're doing in this state is we're destroying the American dream and people's ability to get to it. So here's the bigger, broader 20-year problem. We live in one of the states that has the highest levels of affordability. People increasingly can't afford to live here. We entered this session having raised $400 million in fees last year. This year we have the biggest tax increase in state history. We've raised property tax levels for local jurisdictions and dumped teachers' pensions onto the local jurisdictions. So folks will undoubtedly be seeing property tax increases. We've also not dealt with the issues of energy costs, and it's really stressful to me and the people I represent to look at a future where they see not only is the cost of living not going to decrease, but they see continual increases when the middle class is already struggling. So I don't think we have considered the 20-year problems that we face, and I believe we're going to be back next year dealing with another deficit, so that's why I'll be no today.
Okay. Yes.
Madam Speaker. Thank you. I stand to explain my vote very briefly.
Please.
First, I want to say, well, I actually am pretty quick. I'll say summary from issue in depth of Moody's from the 10th of March of this month. The first sentence says federal austerity measures, including cuts to U.S. government headcount and office space, pose a greater threat to Maryland than any other state. So we can debate other issues, but some things are facts. I stand because the revenues that we are going to talk about here puts us in a good position moving forward, not because of anything that we are doing, but because we have to respond to the company that is in our town. It's also helping shore up our transportation trust fund that is important to all parts of Maryland. But most importantly, particularly as the subcommittee chair on public safety, I stand to support this BRFA because we restore money to VOCA, which came in as a cut. The federal government has been reducing that over and over and over again. And I just want to make sure folks are perfectly clear. Voting red on this BRFA means you are voting against funding for Violence Against Crime Act survivors, domestic violence survivors, and others. Voting against this also means you are voting to not support setting aside resources for rape testing kits, which we restore in this. And I know you all don't necessarily stand with that. But just a second, our majority leader, we had to make tough choices. Our governor had to make tough choices as introduced. But we heard you all, and we restored a number of those. I'll also just state that there were a number of things that you all said that was not included in here, such as increasing sales tax on everybody. Many people in this room voted against iGaming last year. You know what's not in this package? iGaming. So I just want to say that I thank the work of the committee chairs, of Appropriations and Ways and Means, and my colleagues. I respect that many of you cannot vote for this, but I just want to make sure you are all aware, thank you, Madam Speaker, that you're voting against public safety.
Okay. All right.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I'd like to explain my vote. I'm voting against the taxes, the fees, and the different, I want to be nice how I say this. Our district and 6th district cannot afford this. New taxes and fees. We all buy cars. Doubling the taxes for buying a new vehicle for titles, we just can't afford it. That with the property taxes are going to go up, especially with all this new money going down, being passed down to the counties to pay for teachers' pensions and other things. Property taxes, like I said yesterday, are out the roof. I can't imagine what's going to be like in the next 6 months. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Now, I'll be very brief. I am simply voting against or voting no on this bill because, again, it is the largest single tax increase in the state of Maryland's history. It's not because I'm against some of the spending that he discussed there, but no matter how you spin it, this is the largest tax increase in our state's history. I'm voting no. Thank you.
Clerk will take the call. There being 93 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 352 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. I want to thank all of you for the interesting debate we've had over the past 2 days. I also want to thank our committee chairs, committee staff, and our DLS analysts for all the hard work they've done over the past several months on the budget. Passing a balanced budget is one of our most important jobs as legislators, and I'm proud of the 141 legislators. They're not all in this room. We got a couple who are not here. In this room who have all contributed something to this budget. Introduction of House Bill during the last 35 days of session. Recognizing the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I know it is customary in this situation to blame one senator, but the reason really lies not across the hall, but down the road in DC. Now, whether you view recent federal actions as responsible downsizing or reckless dismantling is irrelevant. The bottom line is we know it's hitting Maryland families hard, and we know there's still more to come. And our job in this body is to protect Maryland, our residents, and our economy. We don't know how extensive the impact will be, and we don't know how far our limited resources will stretch. For the thousands of Marylanders losing their livelihood, this bill offers meaningful relief without relying on state spending. We know that our safety net will be stretched. There's no question about that. The question is, will it tear? And if so, how many families would fall through? Whether they're federal employees or contractors, or employees or owners of small businesses, which may not be directly connected to the federal government, but will be impacted just as painfully. For those individuals and their families, this bill provides a buffer between disruption and devastation. Yes, it is very late in the session.
And why was it late?
Because it is in response to what we've seen unfolding since January 20th and took additional time in drafting. And despite it being late, it is not too late to offer relief. So colleagues, on behalf of our constituents, I ask for your green vote.
Okay. All right. Shall the bill be introduced? It requires 94 votes. Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
Did I call on you?
I'm just asking.
Hold on a second. Yes, go ahead. We
Okay,
had
thank
to
you.
check things, just pop up.
I could have sworn that the majority whip and had a beautiful conversation with us a couple weeks ago about how we were passing something to address just what the gentle lady just said. It was lively. I would love to sort of be reminded of what that bill number was and what we were doing there. But I swear this is like a Groundhog Day moment, because I'm very sure we literally already did exactly what was just discussed. So I'll be red on this, since we've already spent money doing exactly what she just suggested.
Okay. The clerk will call the roll. There being 101 votes in the affirmative, the bill will be introduced. Clerk will read the bill and committee assignment.
House Bill 1557, Delegate Feldmark, House Rules.
And then it's the work at the desk, committee announcements, appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The appropriations will have bill hearings at 2:30.
Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House Judiciary Committee subcommittee chairs will be meeting at 2:15. Bill hearings beginning at 3:15.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Environment and Transportation Committee will meet for bill hearings at 2:30.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee will meet for bill hearings at 2:15 p.m.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Economic Matters Committee has a lot to do today, so we will be meeting at 1:30 to begin bill hearings. 1:30.
Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Health and Government Operations Committee will be meeting at 2 p.m. for bill hearings. Thank you.
Any subcommittee announcements?
Madam
Yes,
Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Housing and Real Property Subcommittee will be meeting digitally at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Housing and Real Property, 5 p.m. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Right. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee will be meeting at 1:20.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Motor Vehicle and Transportation Subcommittee will meet after bill hearings today.
Okay. Any other subcommittee announcements? Okay. Any delegation of subcommittee? Yes. I'm
Thank you,
sorry.
Madam
Yes.
Speaker. The Environment Subcommittee will be meeting virtually at 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay. Any delegation announcements? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Montgomery County delegation will be taking our photo tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. here in the State House at the inside stairs, just outside the doors. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Hartford County delegation will be meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the room 302. Thank you. At 9 o'clock.
Any other delegation announcements? Okay. Any caucus announcements? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, the Latino Caucus will have our final Cafe Con Amigo today at 3:40 with the Senate President. Please be on time. It is virtual.
Caucus, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland will meet tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Please plan to join us for possibly our final meeting of the legislative session. We're looking forward to seeing everyone 8:30 a.m. sharp tomorrow in person in the Baltimore City Delegation Room. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. All righty. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, the Maryland Legislative LGBTQ+ Caucus Executive Committee members, we are having our annual breakfast with the governor tomorrow at 8 a.m. Please be there on time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All right. Any other caucus announcements? Okay. Women's History Moment. Good delegate representing Prince George's and Anne Arundel County. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. So, Madam Speaker and colleagues, each year during Women's History Month, we pause to reflect on the trailblazers who come before us. Those who fought not only to open doors, but to hold them open for others. Today, I rise on behalf of the Maryland Women's Caucus to honor 4 extraordinary women whose legacies are etched in the very walls of this chamber and in my life. These women, Shirley Nathan Pulliam, Dolores Kelly, Shane Pendergrass, and Gwendolyn T. Britt, were not only fierce legislators, they were mentors, truth tellers, and torchbearers. They taught us how to lead with courage, how to legislate with compassion, and how to make space for others as we climbed. Senator Shirley Nathan Pulliam is a force of nature. Born in Jamaica, she immigrated to the United States and brought with her a deep belief in equity and access. She was the first Caribbean-born person elected to the Maryland General Assembly and championed public health long before health equity was a buzzword, and she was my mentor. She knew that zip codes could determine life expectancies, and she set out to change that reality. Senator Nathan Pulliam was never interested in the spotlight. She was interested in impact, and that impact lives on every piece of legislation that bears her fingerprints. Senator Dolores Kelly. Senator Dolores Kelly embodied wisdom and grace. Her intellect was unmatched, her mentorship unwavering. She was a scholar and a servant, bringing the full weight of her academic rigor and moral clarity to the work of legislating. She held a PhD. Very smart. Senator Kelly shared the Senate Finance Committee with quiet strength, always asking the hard questions, always centering members to focus on people, because that's what mattered. She taught many of us what it means to build coalitions without compromising our values. She reminded us that dignity must always be at the heart of public policy. Senator Gwendolyn Britt, though taken from us too soon, left an indelible mark. A civil rights activist and fierce advocate for justice, she brought the soul of the movement into this building. She carried the story of those who marched and those who were silenced, and she demanded we listen. Her work on voting rights Marriage equality and criminal justice reform laid the foundation for so many of the freedoms that we today take for granted. Senator Britt reminded us that progress is made piece by piece by people willing to speak hard truth and take bold action. She did it when it wasn't popular. Delegate Shane Pendergrass, the legendary chair of the House Health and Government Operations Committee, is a model of principled leadership. She combined sharp policy acumen with a deep reverence for progress and process. Delegate Pendergrass taught us to do the work, to know the bill, to understand the law, anticipate the opposition, and stand firm in what you believe. She was something. She advanced groundbreaking health legislation while holding the line on ethics, transparency, and public trust. And she always made space for new voices at the table. I know I'm one of them. And if you came prepared, she welcomed you. If you weren't, she made sure you were next time. That is mentorship. That is legacy. These women shaped my own path in public service. Their words echo in the way I carry myself. Their examples guide how I lead, and their legacies continue to inspire every woman in this body. And every girl watching from the gallery and reading the news who dares to dream of elected office. So today, let us say their names with reverence. Shirley Nathan Pulliam, Dolores Kelly, Gwendolyn Britt, and Shane Pendergrass. Let us tell their stories with pride, and let us recommit ourselves to the work they began, to build a Maryland that is more just, more equitable, and more inclusive for all, for everyone. Thank you.
Are there any personal or guest announcements? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, if you could just briefly help me, I want to introduce two very close individuals, dear friends of mine. First, young lady, Miss Kathy Chambers. She's a dear friend, amazing young lady. Wouldn't know that. She retired from the FBI. She's like a grandmother to my children. Her father used to be my commander. This brother was a 3-star general at Fort Hood. Her uncle is Admiral Lawrence Chambers. He's the first African American ever to command an aircraft carrier, the USS Midway. And in fact, during Vietnam, he was a part of Operation Frequent Wind in 1975. And if you open your history books, you'll always see a photo of them pushing aircraft over the edge to make room for the Vietnamese allies to land. Well, that was his command that this black man did in 1975, shortly after he received that command. And I also want to introduce her longtime boyfriend and my father-in-law, Vernon Stansberry. And again, this brother was born in 1939 during the Jim Crow era. He moved to the south side of Chicago, grew up with Emmett Till. Used to go back and forth, and he told me about going back and forth from Chicago to Mississippi and the dangers. Talking to him about, he basically graduated and went to college at 15. Went and got his MBA from Harvard because he explained to me, don't wait for a handout. And the government can create dependency, but you can create freedom. So he's always fought for what he wanted. He became the Deputy Secretary of Commerce under Jimmy Carter, created his own government contracting corporation that basically worked for NASA for 40 years. Currently he's retired, and he now relaxes as the chair of the Alfred Street, or the chair of the Alfred Street Choir. So please welcome my family and my father-in-law, Vernon Stansberry and Kathy Chambers. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Who's going? Yes. Come on, go. Where are you? There. Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. The other day when we were all celebrating the wins, the amazing wins of the Maryland women and the Maryland men's basketball team, there was another player from Ole Miss who won in an upset, and they named her Queen of the Hill for playing the most games at Ole Miss. And during that game, permission to use the delegate's name?
Permission granted.
During that game, how many times did they show our colleague, her grandmother, Pam Queen, on screen during that game? So congratulations to Delegate Queen.
Yes. Hold on one second. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While we're doing the grandparent thing, I have a rare visitation today from my daughter, Rebecca, but my grandchildren, Natalie and Hannah, are hanging out here in the front row. These are the people who keep me. You ask me where all my energy comes from? Right there. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, permission to use delegates' names.
Permission granted.
On behalf of Delegates Edelson and Delegate Lewis, I want to welcome the doctor of the day who was up here for most of the debate, but I think went back downstairs, Dr. Erin Murray, who is a rheumatologist from Federal Hill. Her practice is in Millersville, and we want to welcome her to the General Assembly today.
Any other guests? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to announce a good friend who's visiting the state of Maryland today, my good friend, Ben Crump.
Okay, any other personal or guest announcements? Okay, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, before we adjourn, I would like to ask for a moment of silence for the 6 workers who died in the Key Bridge collapse: Darlene O'Neill Castillo Cabrera, Carlos Daniel Hernandez Estrella, Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, Miguel Angel Luna Gonzalez, Jose Minor Lopez, and Minor Yasir Suazo Sandoval. A moment of silence, please. Thank you.
All right. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their presence? Clerk will take the call. There being 131 members present. Oh, this is the wrong sheet. It says still in session. House is still in session, recognizing the majority leader again.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stands adjourned until Thursday, March 27th at 10 o'clock a.m. Legislative date, March 12th.